There it is, look at that.
Are we expecting any other administrators?
Oh, dang it.
JC's
No, I'm not gonna ask about that.
so true. Just call Lawrence hit the superintendent's room.
Hey, do you need this?
So it's just calling. Yeah, it's going to go. The SSA.
You might be able to get started. She's just finishing up.
Good evening. I want to call to order the Carlynton School District School Board meeting for June 24th. At this time, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and we could have Mr. Russ Peterson lead us in that. Although you did not have anybody.
No. Please incarnate.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Russ. And also, before we take the roll call, I'd ask Mr. Pfeiffer to introduce the individual who was going to take the roll call tonight.
Thank you. Sitting to my right, as many of you know, Pat Fisher, confidential secretary to the superintendent, for many, many years served this district, is retiring at the end of this month. And we brought in Catherine Kovac, who worked for many years with the folks at Quaker Valley. She's subbing in tonight for Michelle Herman. Catherine, or Katie, she also goes. It's been a great addition so far to the Carlynton staff. And I want to welcome you here tonight, and she'll be filling in. You'll see her in the superintendent's office.
Thank
So
you.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
So if you'd please take the roll call, Katie.
Yes, Director Apple,
He is not here tonight.
Director Eugen,
Here.
Director Shell,
Present.
Director Sharippa, present. Director Shriver,
Here.
Director Tessero,
Here.
Director Wolkowiak,
Here.
Director Wilson,
She is not able to make it tonight.
and President Russo.
He is not able to make it tonight.
Thank you.
At this time, I don't know if anybody picked up the paper. Did anyone in the public have any comments on the agenda as it's, at this time would be your opportunity to speak to any agenda item? Okay, seeing that no one is doing that, we will go for the approval of the minutes for the June 3rd, 2013 agenda setting committee voting meeting as presented. Is there a first?
We need a motion.
So moved.
Okay, and second?
Second.
So the motion is approved.
Motion made and seconded, so any comment from the
Oh,
directors?
any comment?
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking to see if I had any, but I don't, so.
So a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion is approved. The board did meet in executive session prior to this meeting, and there was a discussion about contracts and personnel issues. And Mr. Pfeiffer, we have administration reports.
We do have some administration reports to take place. From the superintendent, we had a very successful end of the year. Commencement went very well with the kids who walked across. The end of the year testing went well. We've got back some PSSA raw data that Mr. Mantich is going to discuss. The teachers have been cleaning their rooms, getting ready for the renovations. At the special meeting for general purposes last Monday, we went over and approved several bid contracts, the mechanical works for the HVAC, the abatement with the tile, the exterior doors, the door hardware for interior locks. All that was approved. We're also moving ahead at the meeting prior on June 3rd. For folks who may remember about painting the light poles and flag poles down at Honus Wagner in the district. So there's a lot of renovation going on that we're finally being able to move ahead on. Now, in terms of when, how long it's going to take place, we're still working on that to get the time frame down, but at least we're finally getting started on some of that. So at this point, I'd like to turn over to Mrs. Hudson. If you have anything to add from Carnegie.
Sure. Carnegie won the Educational Leadership Award through Junior Achievement. And we'll receive an award on Thursday night for our participation in the Junior Achievement Program. That's it.
Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Hudson?
I was out of town, so I got my signal item. There was a student that was honored. I'm understanding a student with Mayor Kubistik and you and the signal.
He was
item.
the Citizen Award.
Okay,
And then
yeah.
we honored Chief Harbin. We had a
Okay.
surprise.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Surprise thing for him.
Yeah, but so I might be several weeks behind.
Yeah, he
but-
Melina DeRose won our Citizenship Award.
Yeah, so I was just looking through. I was like, oh look.
Yep, there we were.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Myford.
Just that the end of the year reports have been submitted from Pupil Services. We've submitted the Student Assistance Program data to the Department of Education, the Homebound Report, the Early Intervention Report, and signed the agreement with the IDEA pass-through funds for early intervention with the intermediate unit.
Anybody have any questions for Mrs. Myford? Okay, I'd like to jump over Mr. Christie for a moment to go to Mr. Mantish to talk about the PSSAs and the preliminary data we got back. I believe everybody has a packet to go over. Again, the key point to emphasize here is this is the raw data. So the confidence interval, safe harbor, those things aren't calculated in it. It's just the raw student score data for the PSSAs. Mr. Mantish.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like Mr. Parker said, this is the preliminary raw data received from Data Recognition Corporation. Last week we received about 1,200 pieces of data, and we did a preliminary study on the results, and that was the creation of this particular packet. The data packet you have sitting in front of you basically is broken down into 5 sections. The first section, which I have tabbed in orange, is the district composite, and the data is broken down by grade level, test, and proficiency categories for each grade level. The second one, which is tabbed in pink, is the Carnegie Elementary composite, and it is also broken down by grade level, test, and the proficiency categories for each particular grade level, and the proficiency rates that will go along with that. The third category is Carlynton Elementary, and it is also broken down by grade level, by test, and by proficiency categories, and finally a overall proficiency rate for each one of those. The fourth category, which is tabbed in green, is the junior high school, senior high school grades 7 and 8. And it is also broken down by grade, test, proficiency levels, and a total overall proficiency rate for each particular test. And finally, in the mauve color, is the 4-year trend of proficiency scores for all Carnegie, Carlynton, every grade level, and the junior, senior high school. That's at this moment in time. So I guess, instead of breaking down all the numbers, I mean, it's pretty much, listed in the categories.
The data looks, the data that you provided looks good. Is there anything that, at a cursory glance, that you see as a trend for?
Actually, when you talk about, like, at the end, when I put the 4-year trend together for proficiencies, from a statistical standpoint, even though the data received is still raw data and it's going to be finalized by the Department of Education, it just appears that, most grade levels, are plus or minus 2, 3, 4 points across the board for the past 4 years, which, from the mathematical standpoint, is sometimes considered to be statistically insignificant, that the test scores have been constant through the past 4 years, is basically what this was telling me at different moments. There has been some ups and downs in some of the categories. But again, being the raw data, I'd like to see how the state's going to do the attributions of some of the students that we have, and as to what the final proficiency rate would be, especially when you go into the 7th grade in mathematics and reading, and the 8th grade in math and reading. You know, those kind of numbers, I'd like to see how they're finally going to pan out when they do all the final attributions and the final tallies come in. As far as the raw data is concerned, just by the numbers of everybody who was tested, that's kind of where they fell at that particular number.
I think where this data is going to help the building principals is they're going to be able to do some professional development, teacher training along the lines of the needs of their building. So if you look at some of the raw data for the 5th grade scores at Carnegie, there's suggested a need and some reading instructions would be beneficial for there. So that's really where to benefit the data. How are we going to target services to kids based on what some of this data is showing us? And again, this data is raw, and it doesn't combine, you know, where the old PSSAs had the old subgroups of economically disadvantaged, special needs, and then broke it down into different ethnic groups. You know, now there's the historically low-performing group, which combines all those categories, and you only need 11 kids to be in that subcategory, whereas before you had to get 40 kids. So again, that's going to affect some professional development we do and some improvement plans by building and eventually by teaching, to work with some of the teachers and grade levels to build these scores up.
Right, I mean, because, I mean, if you look just preliminarily, the science scores at the elementaries are okay. Science scores at the 8th grade level need some help. So part of that is what we were talking about earlier this year with the remediation for Keystones. Is any of that going to be incorporated into the PSSA work that needs to be done?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, just in terms of how, so people get an understanding of what these are actually, how these actually are helpful to a school, you know. And so from the Keystones, we saw certain things, and so we have some Keystone remediation going on. And so from the PSSAs now, we see this, and so that work from Keystones then is going to be used to help PSSA as well, because the standards are slightly, because PSSA is the Pennsylvania standards and Keystone is the Common Core, and so you know, even though the standards seem different, we are going to treat the need that is as equal need. Yes.
Yeah, these are going to feed what goes into the Keystone courses that we have. Like these go up to the 8th grade, and you know, once we get the data, you know, finalized, you know, nice thing we can do is sit down and we can find, like I said, we see some weaknesses here. You know, we can start targeting some root causes to those in data meetings and find ways of being able to rectify, you know, once we identify the root causes, find a way of correcting those.
And so taking that a step further then, if we see that, you know, the situation at the elementaries is one thing, but the situation at the high school is another, then we will work elementaries and high school together to try to figure out what deficits in 7th grade or 6th grade impacted the 8th grade, because the 8th grade deficit didn't just happen in 8th grade, right? I mean, necessarily.
That's the interesting.
Right. So these scores will then be used to help us programmatically and when we have things in place.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And
Let me ask a question. I always see this data arranged, you know, by year, but I guess the one question that I have for Mr. Mantich, is the data ever rearranged to more or less follow a class group, so to speak?
These are great questions.
Would there be any value in, and let me just point to an example, okay? If I look at Carlynton Junior, Senior High, grade 7 and 8, okay? If I look at 2012, grade 7, 79.8% are advanced or proficient, correct? Now I go to 2013, that's the same class group, right? I see a drop of almost 21 points. So I'm just wondering if we track that data in a manner to really examine curriculum, because if that class, in fact, was at almost 80% in 2012, and it's dropped to 58% in 2013, somehow there was a disconnect for this group of students. And keep in mind, I don't know what the demographic of that group and how that changed in that period of the year. But I would almost see some value in seeing this laid out by class group as they advance, to see how this group, and it may not be valid from years 3 through years 11. It may be more of a year-by-year comparison, looking at this data. Because then again, if I would look at, say for example, that same group, grade 7 mathematics, in 2011, 62.4. But then in 2012, they jumped almost 11 points. So that's one class prior to the one that I had just described. So what are the dynamics that actually change within that grouping, so to speak, as they advance through the system? Might be another way to look at that, to examine where the deficiencies actually are. Was it a case where maybe the curriculum did change? Maybe new teachers or older teachers, there was some other dynamic to ensure that the same curriculum that was successful a previous year and actually advanced us by 11 points, now the next year has dropped us. What caused that change within those groups?
Yeah, that was the root cause that I was referring to.
Sorry, I went on too long.
No, but
I was just trying to look at it a different way, because I always see it year by year.
And we did take a look at that.
Okay.
And we did notice that particular one at the 8th grade level.
Oh, yeah, it's glaring.
Yes, very
It's
much
glaring.
so.
Okay.
Well, I was going to make the same point. If you look at
Yeah.
craft in 3rd grade in 2010, that is now the craft in 6th grade in 2013. And there's a substantial drop. Now, so I think what Ray's point is that we probably need this data to follow the classes.
I can do that if
Yeah.
you like.
Well, I think that it's more, it's a way of presenting it,
Right.
but it's
Yeah.
also
It's all
a way
here,
of seeing
just-
how this same group of children are advancing. And maybe one year they're up, the next year they're down, but to really examine what are the causes and effects of why this had occurred.
That's correct. And when Mr. Piper and I, we talked about things like that.
Okay.
We talked about having data meetings with the principals, just not the principals, but the teachers as well, saying, okay, we have a 23, say, for example, this one is a 23-point drop or 21-point drop.
Right.
What do we believe is the root cause behind it?
Hmm.
It could be curricular. It could be, a bunch of other things too.
Absolutely, and it could be a change of, that class group itself, where some kids move out and others move in, but, there's some core there
Yeah,
that, you could really use that core as it advances to see how we're advancing, with the educational
Yeah,
process.
but that was a very good thing.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, why don't you mention a little bit about PVOS and the value-added assessment? Because I think sometimes those get, if you're not looking at that data,
Yeah,
because that does show some of the growth of the groups over
Yeah,
the years.
that's,
Yeah.
the PFAS data shows you growth over time. And basically, when you look at the PFAS data, it gets broken down that, if a group of students come through, a cohort of students come through, and let's say from one year to the next, that your PFAS data shows a 0. Most people think that nothing really happens, but that's not necessarily true. A 0 means that they've actually received 1 year's worth of growth for 1 year's worth of education. And then they start scaling it up to positive 1, 2, and 3, and so on, or negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and so on. As the numbers increase in a positive direction, that is an indication of how much more above a 1 year's worth of growth that the student had received, or a cohort would have received at that particular moment in time, and vice versa. If you get like a negative 2, it's somewhat of a significant, below a full year's worth of growth for 1 year's worth of instruction. So that's where we can kind of get data from the PVOS area as well, from that. But, it's more of a plus or minus based on that type of scale, as opposed to what are the proficiency rates that we have, for the cohort of kids we have moving through. So it kind of gives you the same type of idea, but with a different number scale.
And the nice thing with Carla and JC and Laura and Lee, they're familiar with how to use data and be able to how to plan at the building level and work with individual teacher teams. So it's getting this data to them this summer, this early, is going to help develop some plans for next year. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Mantich about the PSSA data?
One other quick comment. I like some of those questions, and this report's actually really helpful. I haven't seen the raw data like this before, but I like where you guys were going with the questions, and I'm wondering at the state level, do they try to do, or even at the national level, do they try to do follow the student, or is that a recognized approach, or is it traditionally more siloed year by year by year? Is there any indication that there's a recognition of the value of following the students, or is it more done?
The growth model, I mean,
That's how
Okay.
kind of we make UIP.
Okay.
Growth model, and PVASAT does that, and it'll give you predictors on what percentage of them getting proficient the following year.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time looking at that this year at Carnegie, and that's how we base some of it.
Okay.
For example, you could have a kid, let's say you're up at St. Clair, and the kids are coming in the door, and they're already at 90%. But they don't grow, they're staying there because they're already coming in so high. So they may not do as well in a PVAS in tracking the growth of the student as, say, children at Carnegie that maybe aren't coming in quite so high, but that's where you see the instruction has made a difference, and the kids have grown 15 points, 20 points in 1 year. So you can hit the target threshold by making the proficiency range or advanced range on the PSSA, but maybe you don't have the growth that you'd like to see. And then that's another data set that administrators can use. I think for us, we're hitting the targets. It's how that spreads out over the years, but then with the different student groups, the PVAS really says, boy, this was effective with this kid. The RTII program helps, but maybe we could tweak RTII reading in 5th grade for next year. So that's where some of that data is going to help us with some of these kids.
and so all districts get all this information and use growth models to varying degrees, but the reason why everyone cares about PSSA is because this complies with No Child Left Behind. And so, this is why, and then making the adequate yearly progress. That's why everybody cares about but the PSSA results and the Keystone now, it complies with No Child Left Behind, the Common Core. But you use there are different data sets that come in that you use, and I don't know to what degree we use growth model at the various buildings, but
That usually, they use the growth model, confidence intervals, they also use that for a measure of determining AYP at every 2 months time. Now, as we are right now, as you're aware, we are kind of in a transition between the present AYP system and the Pennsylvania School Performance Profile is going to become out, that they're trying to get to replace the current AYP model, where data like this would be used to become part of that entire picture. So they take the proficiency rates of, say, Carnegie Elementary School, and that's going to become maybe 7.5% of the total overall score. But where before it used to be just, here's your proficiency rate, you get the target reading. So there's a lot of data points. Like I said, this was about 1,200 pieces, and we just try to make it in a way we're accustomed to seeing the way the state would present it.
and I started those questions before, just so the public knows what we do with this information, because at this point we just don't have it in a packet and then put it away. We're actually working to have it form different remediation, different supports for different programming.
And again, our faculty and administrators are very attuned to when are we getting the data, when are results coming back, and going through it. So this is a very data savvy district. So now it's going to be, how do we take that data and how do we apply it in the classroom?
The one thing that I'll point out here too is looking at, say for example, the Carnegie mathematics, 6th grade and Crafton combined. Obviously, that transition year into the high school is a somewhat rough year. When you look back to the previous year and you look at the averages between mathematics for 6th grade, Crafton and Carnegie, and then you translate that to the following year. So I think that, this is good information that, historically, I see a drop, between that 6th year and 7th year. So that transition year appears to be somewhat difficult for the students, where you see that drop whenever they move up to the high school, to the junior, senior high. So I think having this data and having somebody to analyze this and make the adjustments will be beneficial for our students.
It's curious, too, that the 3rd graders always do wonderful. and then the decline starts. So and I don't know if it's the nature of the test or the excitement of the students, what it is. But in third grade.
Well, I can tell you, there was also encouraging, I mean, I can look at like 5th grade, Crafton, for example, in math 1 year, and I see that in 6th grade, that same group made a 10-point improvement. So we do make strides in areas. We do make those improvements, but this data, as you said, will help drive those changes that we need to make especially as I see that 6th to 7th grade transition, more successful for our students.
One other quick thought. I agree that generally you kind of see a lot of statistical insignificance in a lot of the numbers, but it would be curious to see, there's a couple of areas, and you pointed one or two out, that there are some pretty big jumps. And I see one in Carnegie, over a 3-year period, a jump in performance in math or in reading by like 15 or 20 points, and just little things like that. I'm curious if after the fact we're able to go and identify, okay, well, we tried something differently programmatically, and wow, it really has worked. Or maybe there was a new teacher that came in that brought some fresh ideas, or whatever the case may be, improvement or a slippage.
To find out what's driving it.
Right.
Yeah, you need to find the drivers.
And then by the same token, if you have the same teacher and the same curriculum teaching year after year, and you see 90%, 88%, 63%, 80%, you kind of see an anomaly, and you realize that these are human beings, and they're kids, and they're each bringing their own individual talents and baggage, good or bad, with them. And it's really tough year to year to say somebody's doing a bad job or good job in a vacuum without that broader discussion. I don't know how you measure that. I mean, maybe something you can't,
But some of the trends are national. Like we mentioned, third grade reading. Third grade reading is nationally, there is a dip after third grade. And there are proposals out there to make it so districts have retention policy. If you don't hit a certain mark, you stay back. So it's not just our district, it's not just Western Pennsylvania, nationally this is a trend, and this is a puzzle that people are trying to figure out. But again, dealing with humans, it's very difficult to figure this out. Because cognitively, the kids are in such different places at the same age, they're just in different places in terms of what they can and can't do and what makes sense to them.
Does anybody have any additional questions for Mr. Mantich? Thank you. Now I'd like to go to Mr. Christie for the business manager report.
The state we must pass the budget by June 30th. It's very quiet in Harrisburg. I did see some information that possibly there will be an additional $10 million given to schools for basic education. However, that hasn't come up for a vote. Also saw some information that possibly they're looking at the pension reform, creating a new tier for new employees after July 1st, 2015. However, again, very quiet. Not enough information is coming out, and it's 6 days before budget has to be passed. So I thought I'd pass that along to just let you know what's going on in Harrisburg also. That concludes my report.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Christie? Thank you.
Okay,
That concludes our administrative reports.
Thank you. Pathfinder, Director Wilson is not here. I do believe she had a meeting, but I'll just let her report on that at the next meeting. Parkway West.
We did have a meeting that was more or less nuts and bolts, nothing special that had gone on, nothing to really recognize, more or less preparations for next year. So I really don't have that report.
Okay, thank you. Shasta? Patty? Thank you. And PSBA Legislative. Director Schell?
Just to pick up where Mr. Christie left off, that it is sort of quiet, but the Senate Appropriations Committee is considering House Bill 1437, which was passed by the House last week, which proposes $28.3 billion in state spending, which is $100 million less than the governor's February proposal, and it does include $100 million for the basic subsidy, which is $10 million more than the governor's proposal. But again, this is it's under consideration, and they might amend it, and so we just don't know what's going on. There is talk coming up from the U.S. Department of Education that they are trying to set expectations that all books should be converted from paper to digital by 2017. How exactly that process is going to look, I'm not really sure, but these are the rumblings coming from the federal U.S. Department of Education, so it's something that I think we need to keep an eye out for to see what exactly they might be requiring school districts to do by 2017, 4 years. No.
Good.
And the 2013 Kids Count ranking came out, and that is a report that takes into account gains in areas like healthcare, early learning, economic stabilities for children. Pennsylvania is ranked 17th out of the nation. Last year they were 14th. So how we manage our children is sort of took a little slip in the past year, something to be aware of. And you know, a child that is healthy and well-fed and safe is a child that's ready to learn. And so if we have children that are struggling, they're going to come to us and continue to struggle, you know. So keeping eye out on these reports are helpful to us as well. So hopefully next year we'll see some improvement. Depends on how that state budget goes and where the money goes. So, and that's it.
Thank you. Under miscellaneous, we have two motions. Number one, the addition to the 2012-2013 list of conference and field trips request as presented and approved by administration. And number two, the scheduled 2013-2014 list of conference and field trip request as presented and approved by the administration. Second?
Second.
And is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motions pass. Under finance, we can do the first three together. Number one, the treasurer's report for the month of May 2013 is presented. Number two, the May 2013 bills in the amount of $1,881,766.64 as presented. And number three, the Carnegie Borough Real Estate Tax Refund as submitted. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions on 1, 2, or 3? Seeing none, we shall vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motions carry. Mr. Walkowiak, how about you read number 4?
I'll need to fill in the blanks.
I would hope to have a few minutes to speak about it.
Sure.
Tell you what the options are, and then the decision on which you want to read. We're required by law to set a millage rate that would generate the same type of dollars that we received in the 12-13 school year. However, we're also allowed by law to raise that millage up to an index. Our index is 2.1%. We've asked our tax counsel, the firm of R. Weiss, to look at the outstanding assessed values that have not been resolved by the county. And Janet Burkhart worked very hard and gave us a figure of her best guesstimate of where we would be based on her knowledge of losses that occurred down at the county. She's recommending that we use an assessed value of $689,365,200. Using her recommended assessment value to push out the same amount of dollars that was received in 12-13, the millage rate would be 18.696. If you went up 2.1%, the millage rate would be a maximum of 19.089. The difference between those two millage rates, based on our collection value, would be an additional $250,547 to the budget. So the board has to decide, do they want to keep the millage at the rate that would generate the same amount of dollars, or go up somewhere between that rate and the maximum, which is .089. And the motion would read, whatever millage you set, I would also now give you what that value is for each $100.
Now, you did say that there's a potential of how many million coming back from the state? And I know that
That's
every
10
year-
million, that's 10 million for the entire state. We're budgeting.
500 school districts, right?
Right, but there's a formula, it doesn't get equally divided by 500. I budgeted what the governor said he would give us in February. So if we do get part of that $10 million, I don't think it's going to make a big difference in our budget.
And then Kirby, the risk that you and others are trying to balance is if the assessment appeals turns out to be more aggressive than we thought, bigger loss, then we're...
Well, the big risk is, once you set this millage, that becomes the value going forward for the index. And the indexes haven't been very substantial. This year is 2.1%, last year was 2.1%, I believe the year before was 1.7%. So you're not going to be able to generate a large amount of dollars just by going up to the index. So there is risk involved, but we can't wait past June 30th to pass a budget. The other things I want to point out to the board is that pension costs are predicted to go up. There doesn't seem to be a lot of action going on in Harrisburg. Our health care went up 7%. That seems to be the trends that are going forward. So, and the state doesn't seem to be providing more dollars as they have in the past. For example, there is no plan calling anymore. So we're on our own when we do anything. So you got to keep that in the back of your head, what's going to be transpiring down the road, what type of dollars you're going to need, how you're going to be able to get those dollars.
So healthcare went up 7%. And
This coming year, 7% increase in healthcare.
And PSERS
Has gone from 12.36% of each wage dollar to 16.93. It's projected to go to approximately 29 or 30% within the next 7 years. Again, that's as of today.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what's going to happen next week if there is a pension reform. Doesn't seem to be on the radar currently, but it's going to be pretty hard to be paying 29% of each payroll dollar.
Right. But even what we know of in the short term, 12 to 16%
It's costing us a lot.
is a firm
That
number.
Yes, today, but I have seen in the past where they rolled it back after passing legislation. That happened 2 years ago. But again, it's not on the radar as we speak today.
In general, though, that gap, that funded gap is so large that it's highly unlikely it's going to go down. It's going to go up. The question is how far up it's going to go. Is that a...
That's a fair assumption.
Okay.
What they did 2 years ago, they being the legislators, they realized that this is coming down the pike. They tried to put some caps on it. They did that by allowing it to go up approximately 4% each year, but they didn't look at the root problem of the money going out with all the people that are getting a pension from the system. They didn't address that. They just basically put a Band-Aid on for a couple of years.
Right.
So they really pushed the debt out further.
Kick the can.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
That's
And what
correct.
is it, what they've done?
So we're looking at healthcare up 7%, PSERS went up by 30%, but 4 percentage points or something like that.
Right, 16.93 to 12.36.
So those are some
Yeah,
pretty
that's
significant
like a-
increases that's going to hit our...
Our employee benefits, when I say employee benefits, I'm talking retirement, health care, those types of things. In this budget, there's an additional $867,000 from last year. It's due to those key items that we just discussed.
Well, last year, what was our millage?
The millage for the 12-13 school year is 23.15.
Okay, so you multiply the 23.15 times your property assessment, is that correct?
To see what your bill is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your assessed value times the rate equals the amount you owe at face value. The school district does allow a 2% discount if paid by August 31st. faces good until October 31st.
But, Allegheny County comes in and reassesses all the properties, for the most part, a higher value. So even though it seems that 18.696 mils is lower than last year's, the tax bill that each taxpayer is going to have to pay at either of these rates is probably going to be more, right?
No. There's going to be winners and losers. You may have to pay
I'm gonna be a
more.
loser.
You may have to pay more, Patty may have to pay less.
No.
I'm just using two people as an example.
Hypothetically.
There's going to be winners and losers, depending
Well,
on...
you have two losers and one winner at this side of the table. Because I could say that I was a winner. And all,
Just-
go ahead,
I'm
Irv, sorry.
It depends on your unique circumstance, on what the county reassessed your property for, and whether you challenge that assessment value or not challenge that assessment value. As I had said, that rate of 18.696 is basically the whole harmless based on our best guess of where we're going to be at the end of the trail when all the assessment appeals are heard. That's a best guess at this point. If we would have adopted our budget in February, the assessed value certified was $724 million. It's down to 709 as of May. And we still have a large number of assessment properties to review. So it looks like it's going to go down based on what's happened between February and May. But I can't tell you the exact number. The exact number will be known next year at this time.
And if we don't take advantage of that 2.1% increase, we can never go back.
Once you set the rate, that becomes the rate until the county does a reassessment or taxes are abolished for real estate tax, which is highly unlikely.
Or you can go to referendum.
You always have options to increase it above the index. As Ray had said, referendum, I don't know of anybody in Pennsylvania that has been successful in that. There has been
Correct.
several districts.
Correct, but it is an option.
There is no doubt there is an option.
So I believe, Sandra, this school district, I think the average increase in assessments was about 40%. Kirby,
I don't have that figure.
so if your assessment went up more than 40%, you're going to pay more. If your assessment went up less, you will pay less than the district average. And I believe it was about 40% between the three boroughs. So, Kirby, what is your recommendation for the millage?
Well, as you know, I'm a scorekeeper, and I'm pretty blunt with what's going on. Now, I'm giving you my personal opinion, knowing that your PSERs are going up, your health care is going up, you're negotiating new contracts, and the state doesn't seem to be forthcoming with money. I would raise it to the maximum amount, would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We are going to actually move, I'm going to present the motion for number 6 before we have Mr. Okoyak read number 4. I think we all should know what the general fund balance is before we vote on the...
May I comment on that?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. The budget that was presented to the board and the proposed final budget that was adopted by the board, the figure is $32,224,514.
Repeat that number, please.
32,224,514. $32,224,514. In that figure was a line for renovations of $7 million. So the question was, well, why is it so much greater than last year? That's the biggest item in there, the $7 million. The board last Monday passed contracts that total, including what you did in March, a little bit over $7 million. However, we paid some of those architect bills already in this fiscal year. So $7 million covers basically what we've asked them to do. It doesn't include any type of change orders that could be happening when they start knocking down walls and things of that nature. If you pass that figure based on the estimates of what our fund balance is to start the year, based on our estimates of the revenues and this expenditure number, you'd be looking at approximately $5.5 million available to start the next year's budget. Or to also then, if you had to start paying for change orders and things of that nature. So you're substantially reducing your fund balance because of the actions that occurred basically last Monday, $7 million worth of contracts.
Correct. And that was the decision of the board to,
That's correct.
to use the fund balance for the renovation
That's correct.
work.
But you
so.
would still have, if this number was passed, and all numbers, I say this number, the 32 million was passed, and everything hit to the penny, you would still have approximately $5.5 million for next fiscal year to start.
Now, we've been using the interest from investments on this fund balance. Is that correct?
So we're earning 21 basis points in our checking account, which is nothing. We were able to have $8 million invested last year, that we're earning slightly higher than that. It's really not a lot of money. But you're correct, we have been earning money on those dollars because we haven't spent those dollars. But it's not in the big scheme of these dollars, it's not a heck of a lot of dollars.
Here we go. As per Kirby's reports, I mean, you look at the rate, we're getting 0.32% on $8 million.
That was last June.
For this period, up to through this June, it was $25,097 on $8 million.
Kind of like what we get at the bank.
Well, what if I make the motion for number 6, because then we can have discussion about the budget.
Yes.
Okay, so number 6, the Carlynton School District 2013-2014 general fund budget in the amount of $32,224,514. Do I have a?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, at this time, does anyone have any discussion about the proposed budget?
I would like to see us begin discussions for some sort of set of documents that helps us, and I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, some documents that help us see depth and some of the interlocking nature of some of these things. And as PSERS continues to grow, the retirement stuff, as healthcare continues to grow, to start forecasting out some of those numbers more aggressively, just to arm us with data. And I think we've been fortunate in that we have a fund balance that has given us a cushion, so we could afford to be. We were afforded the chance to make a mistake or have an error and it not hurt us, and we haven't, so that's good. But as we spend the money that we need to keep our facilities in good shape and have our programs be proactive and educate the kids well, that fund balance is going to shrink, which is what we want to do. Having the visibility into the future to see where PSERS is going, where healthcare is going, where transportation costs are going, where salaries are going, help us to avoid some of the pitfalls of maybe some other districts that we've read about in the paper or heard about, where they looked in a more static fashion at their current budget needs, or they had a plea come from an educational community saying we really need to add XYZ resource for a certain program, and not having a tool in front of you to be able to extrapolate out and say, what does that cost us short term and long term? It's just difficult. So I know we've all had different takes on that and different opinions about what that might look like. And I know the time to prepare those kinds of documents is not a short period of time. So
I agree with you, Jim. In addition to this budget curving, I know you have construction costs. Can you tell us how many new positions we might have in this budget?
there's, as compared to this fiscal year, the 12-13 school years, there's 4 additional teaching positions and 3 data entry aides are in this current budget, excuse me, in this proposed budget.
Do we have justification for the positions?
Well, when we're looking at the different staffing needs, again, we discussed the discipline policy revision and a need for an in-school suspension person. We discussed an elementary school counselor, as we only have one, and the person unfortunately gets trapped trying to go between the 2 buildings. We also discussed the need for the homeless school visitor as a position we've gone back and forth with. So I believe, yes, based on our needs, based on the data, we do need some of these positions. With the new teacher evaluation system that's coming out, the amount of time that the principals are going to have to spend into the classroom with the teachers, doing pre-observations, observations, post-observations, writing it up, getting it back to them, as by law, as of July 1st. That teacher evaluation system is the state standard for how you have to evaluate teachers. So these positions are going to help teachers, are going to help our kids, and are going to help the overall program.
Might I add that one of the positions is at Carnegie, and I believe, Lee, is that something that we're kind of required? Is it the autistic support position?
The autistic support position, right. We currently have a special education classroom, which is considered a life skills classroom, and you cannot have more than 12 students as the ratio for student to teacher. And we're anticipating that next year we will have more than 12 students who need that level of support. So we were adding an autistic support classroom so that we could offer life skills support and autistic support. In the past, they've been blended in the same classroom, but I anticipate we'll have more than 12 students at the elementary level, K to 6, who need that level of support.
So that would really be a requirement of our special ed requirements that we could...
Yes, and we have done the things to prepare that we need to do. I've talked to the Department of Education because we had to submit the special education plan and show, you know, what the ratios were and what the programming was going to be that we were offering. So I have been in contact with PDE. Now they'll have to come out and say that the space is appropriate and what we're planning is appropriate, but it is following the regulations of the ratio that we need to provide.
So this is one of the teaching positions that's going to be added then?
The autistic support
And the other
classroom.
3 would be?
Well, then there was a elementary school counselor.
The in-school suspension. And then we also discussed in the past, if you recall, we approved the homeschool visitor.
Right.
And we never officially hired the person. Right. We have a little flexibility there also if we look to go between students, put somebody in.
So you're...
I have a real concern hiring new teachers with the state handling our budgets as they are and reducing the amount of funding that we receive, our tax situation the way it is, the increase in spending that our district is taking on this year. And I haven't read another school district in the area that is increasing their staff. Most schools are, no matter what the size, are reducing their teaching staff and reducing their aid staff. So I just can't justify hiring teachers at this time when our spending has increased so dramatically.
Well, other school districts probably aren't hiring the way we are because they've hired in the past, whereas we haven't.
Reduced enrollment. Our enrollment has been going down.
But our need has increased. I mean,
Our enrollment has gone down.
But
our taxes, our revenue has not increased.
But the need of our students, apparently, from what everyone is telling us, the needs of our students have increased. The demographics have changed. And so what do we do then? Do we say, sorry, students, I know your needs are different, the demographics are changing, and we never really...
What is our student-to-teacher ratio? Do we know?
It varies by building.
Do we know?
So...
In kindergarten this year, I had 25 in each classroom, 25, 23 in each classroom.
I guess I'm talking about overall the whole district. Do we know our student?
I was thinking of my grade level.
Well,
I
I-
apologize.
Thank you, Carla. No,
Well, we have
no,
113 teachers,
150.
115, and we have how many students?
The last count, we had 1369 students, but again, that where we're seeing a bubble is at the primary grades and the elementary grades as are going through. We saw at the secondary level some of those kids decline for the senior class particularly. So that's why that number dipped a little bit.
So, I mean, at this point, you know, whereas other school districts have different trends, let's say, they're reducing staff or they're not increasing staff. We hadn't increased staff in a few years. We hadn't done these extra positions that we're now looking into that have been talked about for years but never acted upon. And so it's all coming to a head now, because I think people think we kind of do need to play catch up in terms of taking care of our facilities.
When these were brought up, there was one particular person who was bringing them up, and there wasn't any justification behind that. It was a request, and
Well, I don't think it was
I'd really
one
like to see-
particular person. I think
There's been
I'd like
just
to see the backup that would justify hiring these positions, because I don't know how we can do it.
the state is
We're
requiring.
spending too much money.
The state is requiring the autistic support. The staff came together and came up with this student discipline code of conduct policy that we're going to talk about later. And one of the things that they've been asking for years, and you even sat in some of those secondary education committee meetings where they talk about in-school suspension. The in-school suspension discussion has been going on it predates my time on the board. In terms of justification, I don't know how much more justification for at least those two positions you require, but these have been things that have been talked about.
How many students do we have suspended any given day? Do we know?
I wish Mrs. Burns were here, because she has those numbers, and she talked about these numbers, and she talked about
that a few weeks ago.
when she talked about those at previous
I
meetings.
don't recall exactly what they are.
Right, she has those numbers, and so and it's not.
We have 650 students possibly in the high school. I just don't know how you can justify a full-time teacher in-school suspension with 1 or 2 students a day.
It's not 1 or 2 students a day.
So you're saying,
And
how
she,
many is it?
she was,
I think that was the limit that they were, right?
yeah, like 10 or 12 or something like that.
We have
But
10 or 12 students a day that are suspended.
that could be in this program. They're not suspended. It's not like you were bad, now you're in school suspension. This is a tiered approach. So you had to have this many infractions, this. And so when you have that level of infraction, rather than just have them out in the world, you keep them in school because education matters. And so you justify it because education matters. These are at-risk kids. Why would you put them unsupervised in the day when you have an opportunity to keep them in? If we say that we're in the business of developing citizens, then let us do all that we can to develop citizens. And if that means let us try in-school suspension, something that has come from the staff and has been worked on for years and finally coalesced and came together this past year, I say let us support them in that. And yes, it's an increased expenditure, but I think it's a necessary increased expenditure for the good, and not of just the school, but of our community.
Yeah, and I think if I could just interject, I think that what we were, obviously Gary had made these recommendations and we had discussed them, et cetera, but I think that what we were trying to do was to provide a balance. We knew that we had some deficiencies in the educational world. We knew that we had some deficiencies in the buildings. So, and obviously Mr. Mantage in being able to make the adjustments to curriculum. So I think that all of this is put together as a comprehensive plan. Now, even though we budgeted, we haven't hired anybody yet.
That's right.
So, I think that it's prudent, I think it's responsible to include that. Whether or not we hire all 4, I mean, obviously we have to hire 1. I think this gives us at least the opportunity to help the students, so to speak, on the educational side, because we are spending a lot of money that is in the fund balance on the building side. So I think that, in an effort to provide the balance and to address what was seen as the needs, I think that's why this had come about. That was my recollection.
Well, and let me say this about that also. If you recall, last spring, and there was a stakeholder survey where community members, faculty members, students were asked some of the concerns at the secondary level. One of the biggest concerns was inconsistency among discipline, implementation, the policy, which was very, what I would call carousel. If you're a level 1 offense, you can get this, or this, but if it's level 2, you can get this, or this, or maybe something in level 3, I don't know. And it looked very arbitrary and very capricious to people. So as part of revising the discipline policy to come up with a progressive discipline system, our kids would refuse to go to detention. Then the next punishment up was, well, you have a Saturday. Well, they're not going to go. And we're not going to have the car or taxi to drive to people's house, pick them up and physically grab them and take them there. So then they come to school on Monday and see the principal or the assistant principal, and then they'd be suspended. Now, when the state eventually looks at us and has criteria for, what's a successful school, what's a premier district, they're going to look at how many kids are you throwing out. So if we're throwing kids out because they skipped attention, or, it was their 5th class disruption, and, I'm not going to Saturday detention. There needed to be an intervention in between, and that's what in-school suspension is. It's an intervention. The discipline committee built a character education component in there that our school counselors are going to implement with the kids. So it's a way to try to keep them in school. Now, that's not to say there's not offenses where the kids shouldn't be suspended out of school, like, say, a fight, or something that would affect the health and safety and welfare of the overall population, say a threat, that type of thing. But kids are being suspended for a lot of chronic or repetitive behaviors that really shouldn't be out of school suspension. But detention wasn't enough of an answer for that. So the in-school suspension program, and again, in response to the stakeholder survey, to revise the discipline policy was a component that, most schools that you discuss have an in-school suspension program, have a special needs timeout room where they've had to hire somebody so you can implement a behavior management plan. We don't have that.
How many schools have in-school suspension?
Well, I would have to check. I know the school I came from did. I know Woodland Hills did. I know McKeesport did.
Baldwin just closed theirs.
But I would say...
Day in-school suspension or like an alternative ed program?
Suspension, they just shut it down.
Again, I think if you can make it successful, I think it's worth trying.
Well, okay, we want to hire a dean of discipline, a new principal, who I think with the criteria that we're looking at, I think this gentleman or woman that we hire would be able to handle the discipline. Our discipline has been relaxed over the last few years, and I think given the try, the right person in that position can handle the discipline. We only have 656 students in the high school. To hire a dean of discipline, an in-school suspension, and a new principal, all under discipline, I don't think our students are that difficult. I think we do have good students here. Our PSSAs aren't great, but they're not disastrous either. I'd rather do something educationally sound for our students than put a defense plan up.
Oh, but I think that that is an educationally sound plan from the standpoint that they'll be in school and they will be educated versus being out of school.
And even if we don't hire a dean of discipline or dean of students, whatever the title will finally be, having it in the budget in case we should decide, because we will hire the new principal, see how that new principal is working out, and if the new principal says, I've got this, I don't need this extra support, then we don't spend the monies. But if
all you're doing is budgeting.
Right, but if the principal says, I could use this additional support, even if it's just for a year, there's nothing that says this has to be a forever sort of thing.
If you hire them, they're yours.
Right. So
You can't get rid of the position.
I think
So
we...
you hire teachers on the...
it depends on if is this going to be an Act 93 position? I
think that again, we're just looking at budgeting.
Right, and so
we've approved any of these positions other than providing the funds in the budget, so we have a realization that if it comes about, these are the costs that are going to be associated.
Right, so
I just want to state again that there aren't any other districts in our area that are hiring teachers or any positions this year.
That's
Most
okay with
are
me.
eliminated,
I'm not
and it's
really...
because of the financial conditions
I'm not
of the
really
overall
about
system.
following what the other districts do. I'm more about trying to figure out what is best for
I think
our
there's a
district
pattern
at this
here, and we should
particular
actually
time.
look at it. There's a pattern. The funding is weakened. It's across the state level, and it's something that we have to address.
And
We
we-
can't just
and
arbitrarily
we
hire
haven't-
positions without having
We haven't
appropriate
spent
backup.
in the past. There has been justification given. We're merely putting this money in the budget. If
I
all
haven't seen any
positions...
justification.
You haven't been at some of the meetings where the justification was given. So...
And the reason I've been at the meetings is because the schedule has changed, and everyone here at this table understands that I have prior commitments.
Right, and so you can get that information later from the superintendent or however
Okay,
else.
that's between you two, and I think we just need to continue.
And maybe if I could add quickly, Ray's point is good. So this is good dialogue, and we've got different sides that we all have, or not sides, but different shades of understanding of the topic.
Sure.
And so Ray, your point, we could approve the budget as, I don't want to say worst-case scenario, but approve the budget or look at approving the budget as
Well, the last thing I would want to see is for us to not have this and realize that this is a real need and not
Right.
realize the impact. At least this way you realize the impact of what this potential could be.
Right. But then have a very concerted effort, and Patty, to some of your points and some other folks' points, have a more detailed analysis prepared over the next 6 or 8 weeks and understand some directors' concerns about the long-term impacts of these positions and look at each one of them programmatically, and we can all ask questions and challenge them, not in the sense of challenging them, but look at them critically and say, are there other approaches that we can take that gets us to the same place? And I think we all have the same goals, educational goals for our students and aspirations. So the budget might be a worst-case scenario, but then we're very critical in how we then decide on any one position to hire. We look at it in a very detailed fashion. And
But that's the case with all the budgets. I mean, the budget is, potentially you could spend this, and we have these positions up there. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to fill all of them.
Right.
It's just in case once we have more pieces in place, if all these need to be filled, we have the monies to cover it. If we don't need to have them all filled, then we can put the monies somewhere else.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think that what I've heard tonight is, obviously, Lee provided a very good argument that, I mean, the numbers are the numbers, and, according to state regulations, that this is something that must happen. Again, I look back to Gary on the other position, and I see that this is something that the community, that the school community wanted. They wanted to see this change. And, this is a topic for discussion. We can have more discussion on this as far as how do we address it. I think that's all fair, because there is different perspectives here. So that can be done. Now, the others, I agree with Patty, provide a justification. Let's really see what impact this is going to create. So.
And to that point, are there maybe a discussion we can have about net positions? I think Kirby said we have 4 additional positions.
4 additional teachers.
Are there any areas where we've cut or have lost by attrition, and are we balancing out? Is there a reduction of 2 and a gain of 6, and it's a netting out to 4? Those kinds of discussions to better understand where we're headed and what we're looking to do in a broader sense, and then determining the value of each of those positions based on internal feedback and analysis of broader trends. What does our financial position look like? All of those components. So.
And one of the questions I had, talking about these things and deciding finally, what monies will be spent and how they will be spent, just for everyone's benefit, having a fund balance, the estimated fund balance for this past year, 6/30/13 fund balance, is $14,809,000. The estimated 6/30/14 fund balance is $5,535,638. So in terms of how we function and how we can anticipate creating a budget next year, what does that decrease just mean to how we proceed?
Assuming that you're not going to spend another $7 million, just making that assumption. Your revenues and expenditures are not matching up, and I believe it was approximately little under $2 million. So if it was the same budget passed, you'd have to take $2 million out of that $5 million to balance your budget.
Yeah.
For the 14-15 school year.
Which is a really key distinction. And in my mind, I like David's approach and his recommendation to us that we think about operating expenses in one fashion. That's an ongoing cost every year. This fund balance that we have is there, and then it's gone. So if we are spending $1 million or $2 of our fund balance to fund our ongoing operations, it's a really dangerous thing to do for more than a year or two. So
yeah, there's no doubt about that, because I mean, back whenever we were having much larger discussions concerning facilities, I mean, I tried to point that out, that you know, in a very short period of time. I mean, when you spend that type of money, I mean, these are much smaller funds.
Yep.
But when you spend the much larger dollars, that fund balance disappears, and very quickly, the taxes need to be increased. So with Patty's comments in mind, I mean, yes, we need to be prudent, and we need to be watchful of this, you know, not only on a yearly basis, but on almost a meeting-by-meeting basis.
I don't think anybody disagrees with
Because we need to know
that.
in front of us what every impact is going to create down the road because of all the baggage that's tied to that. For each individual that is hired, those costs are compounded and increased every year.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's something where we need to have that forward-looking schedule, so to speak. You know what I mean? So you can see where you're at, making some assumptions as we always have.
Right.
But the things that have come home to roost are healthcare and PSERS. Those are the big ones, and those are the ones that are going to affect us for many years down the road. And I just have one question for this year. $2 million, 14, 15. What about this year, Kirby? What's your estimate as far as the deficit that will be in this year based
You're
on?
talking about 12, 13, or 13, 14?
I'm talking this year fiscally ending on June 30th.
We're going to be coming pretty close to that 14.8. When I say pretty close, I did a real quick estimate today. Looks like based on past years, what we get over the summer for delinquent taxes and for earned income taxes related to GASB 22, expenditures over the summer that we're all this year. Looks like we're probably going to be about $200,000 short. Revenues are going to be short of expenditures by $200,000. Again, I caution you, I don't know what's going to happen next week. I don't know how much money is going to be turned over for delinquent taxes, earned income taxes, those type of things. I looked at previous fiscal years, came up with an average of what happens over the summertime. I can tell you 100% what it's going to be when the audit's done in October.
Oh, that's, you know, close enough's good enough.
I can't do that. It looks like we're going to be short about $200,000.
Just in a sense, in comparison to years gone by.
Last
where
year, we had $996,000 revenues exceeded expenditures. The year before was $1.6 million revenues exceeding expenditures. We're not going to be exceeding our expenditures.
There's no
Or we're going to be
exceeding.
very close.
So about $1 million swing.
Yes.
From $1 million
Yes.
in excess to zero or a small negative.
So my next question was, for the estimated revenues and expenditures for 13-14, estimated revenues were $22,951,000 roughly, and expenditures were $32,224,000. So how problematic in terms of operations?
You're not spending all that $14.6 or $8 million. You're going to have $5.5 million. And then depending on what you do with the millage rate tonight, you might have a little bit more. So you're going to have money to take care of the 14-15 school year. But after that, if you use that money, it's gone forever. That comes back to what Patty's saying. Once you hire people, that's going to be taking up that $5.5 million.
Right, because it's not just their salaries, it's the PSERS, it's the healthcare,
It's everything.
it's all of
Cost
it.
of transportation, cost of
Right.
books. If a kid moves in, if Lee comes to me and says, hey, we've got a special education kid that's $60,000, we didn't budget for it. We can't say no.
Right.
So,
But, you know, the difficulty for, and the reason why I get so heated is because, you know, understanding of what Director Schwipper's concerns are. There's also my personal understanding of what, you know, these monies need to be spent, these issues need to be addressed. How do we as a board then balance this? And, you know, in terms of just keeping it in the budget, for me, it's just so in case we do decide to ultimately fill them this year, it might be that as we move forward, one or two of these positions that are up for grabs, we don't fill because we decide either a new principal is the key and other problems are resolved, or we look and we say we just can't do it at this time. but to at least keep it in the budget, to keep our options open, so when we do have those further discussions, we do at least have the options. Because I do totally understand what Director Sherpa is getting at and what she's saying. But it is difficult for me personally because understanding that there is this history and this need, how do we as a board proceed then? And that is my personal difficulty.
I had a question about the 3 data aides. Are they full-time?
Yes, they would be full-time aides.
And that is because?
Well, because the principal's going to be in the classroom more. They're really going to be entering discipline write-ups into the computer and assisting there. Right now, the building principal spent a lot of time doing clerical work, entering that in, and that's taking them out of the classroom and taking them out of other programs.
So that would be one at each school?
That's right.
Is that your intent?
That's right.
And the difficulty with the added responsibilities on the principal is that they have to be in the classroom to do the teacher evaluation, the teacher observations for the teacher evaluation. So the time that they might have spent in the past doing this clerical work, they now have to spend additional time in the classroom and then additional time doing additional clerical work for inputting the teacher observation and teacher evaluation information. Am I understanding what the...
But are the
Right, but in like I said, a lot of schools, like at the secondary level, for example, there's a lot of times a data entry secretary. So when you're going through the form to enter in and give that to the secretary to enter in the data, the principal themselves isn't at the table doing that. So our people spend a lot of time during the day. If it gets crazy, then they're in their office. So now you're paying somebody, $60-some thousand, $80-some thousand so they can do clerical work. Instead of having them out in the classroom where you want them, visible in the halls, visible with the kids, making sure the curriculum is being implemented, checking the lesson plans, are we on target to meet our performance standards? So that's where I see a need that could help the building administrators out.
Is there a way to get by with fewer than one in each building? Fewer than 3? Is there? Well,
I think you got to have one at the secondary because you've got the biggest concentration of kids and you get more severe discipline taking place here. But if you went with 2, maybe you could have one spend a couple days at Carnegie, a couple days at Kraft, and go back and forth.
Are the teacher evaluations going into effect for the 2013-2014?
They're going into effect
July 1st.
7 days from now.
July 1st, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Gary, did you review that software that's coming out?
We looked at the PAE type software. I had a meeting with JC and Carla and Laura and Lee, and they're very enthusiastic about it.
Do you see that helping in this situation?
Well, sure. See, that goes with the wireless access points, so that they can go with their laptop or Chromebook into the class and use that on the spot. You can use it to email the teachers. I know the IU has been using it with other schools, and it's tied in with the SAS portal, which is very attractive. So we are looking at that, put that in.
So, but that wouldn't necessarily help us cut the data entry personnel down to 1.
No, but they're 2 separate things. That's what I mean. That it's the clerical work that they have to do with the teacher observations now is so much greater than what it was before.
Right.
So this program is going to help them with that. But if they're there, Johnny skipped attention this day, Saturday detention, and then he told so-and-so to go somewhere. And then if you're typing that all the time, it gets to be, how do you want to use your building administrators? How much percentage of the day do you want them doing clerical work? I would posit as superintendent, I need them in the classrooms.
So, any other,
I have a question.
For the budget.
It's about the budget. Kirby, this past week, well, several weeks ago, the decision came through from Harrisburg Department of Education that Rosslyn Farms was not permitted to withdraw from the Carlynton School District. Since then, Rosslyn Farms has issued a appeal that they want to have this lawsuit revisited. Should that appeal be successful for the Rosslyn Farms people and they do leave the district, what kind of an impact, financial impact, will that leaving of Rosslyn Farms taxes, what will that have on our budget?
Off the top of my head, real estate taxes and earned income taxes, it's $1.2 to $1.3 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, that we would not have in Roslyn Park or part of the Georgia.
So we're not out of the woods yet with the potential possibility of us losing that financing for our school district. Is that correct?
I'm not an attorney. My understanding is they can appeal, and certainly they have.
That's what, they've appealed, and there is that chance. Certainly, you know, we have one already, so we don't believe that it will be overturned, but there's always the chance that could happen.
And maybe just to comment on the strength of the state's response was there were several points that small group of residents raised, and each of those points were countered with facts that the state kind of brought forth and said, well, based on your complaint of that small group of people, we find no merit in any of your points. So maybe if there were 3 or 4 points that they raised and the state said, well, that one has a little bit of merit, this one has some merit, but the state, as a layman, I'm looking at their response and saying the state said there's 0 merit to any of the claims, and so it, as a layman, kind of shut down the thing and said there's just no merit to your claim at all. So
what would the likelihood be that it would be enacted for this coming school year? Could you, I mean,
For 2013, 14?
13, 14?
None.
Okay, so an impact on this particular budget might not be a reality, but if it went through, it could impact 14, 15.
Yes. I shouldn't say none, I would say
virtually
highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm, just trying to, just in terms of.
Extremely unlikely.
Right, yeah, so it's possible, but not probable, that it would happen in this school year.
Right.
But, okay, just something to think of.
Any other questions, comments?
So in terms of the data processing aids, I keep keeping the title wrong, are we going to hold that at 3 for the budget? Are we?
Please keep in mind, Carla has no assistant principal.
I know.
JC has no assistant principal.
I know.
So, they are really Johnny on the spot with everything that goes on down there. And when I've been, for example, to Carnegie, and there's been a student who's been behaviorally, having a meltdown, for lack of a better word, who's over in the room getting the kid to calm them down? Carla Hudson. I'm down at Carnegie or over at Crafton, and there's another discipline issue with a student. Dr. Maslick is out doing that. So I think for those two, because they don't have assistants in the building, I think it'd really be a benefit for them, because again, I want them out into the classrooms. In the high school, that's where you usually see the more severe behavior. Again, 7th and 8th grade, 9th grade, it probably represents a bigger proportion of the discipline referrals at this building.
What about the school nurse? Is there a school nurse there in the building?
At the high school?
At the
Yes.
elementary school?
There's
Right.
one, we share between Crofton.
Ullins, right? Because she just
This is
rescinded.
Gillen's, yeah,
she
and then
just
Byerly's
rescinded
there
her.
2 days. We have
Right.
a nurse's aide, and Ellen, the
And
other
you
2
do
days.
have a secretary.
I do have a secretary.
I think if we look at a scenario where we're expected to spend operationally, just using real round numbers, $2 million more than we're taking in, just really rough numbers. And given that we're expecting a $5.5 million fund balance, assuming we approve the budget and assuming we authorize each of these hirings and spend all that we budget, we can do that for 2.5 years, and then we show up and we're out of money. And that assumes that there is no further increase in health care and no further increase in pension costs and no further increase in salaries.
No further increase in anything.
Which is
Nothing.
an unlikely, if not impossible scenario. So for us to be voting on a budget that is already $2 million deficient feels like maybe we skipped a step in the process somewhere. And maybe that was all temporarily fallen short here. So maybe I should have realized this in April or May. But I think we've had some ongoing discussions, and we've talked about these in piece parts. But for us to have and we saw this a month ago, so we've raised some questions, we've had some dialogue, but I don't know how, without great consternation, how we can vote on a $2 million deficit without having some real dialogue about how we're actually going to spend those monies, because this is not a sustainable model. Can we all agree on that?
It's not sustainable.
And yet, we have a school district to run, and Mr. Pfeiffer has come in and done a phenomenal job taking us and taking our strengths and building upon them and energizing us and revitalizing us. So I'm not looking to delay or undermine or whatever else, but I do think we need to have a very candid discussion about what this means and where those numbers fall and how we make some trade-offs. And I'm not smart enough to know where it comes from, so I think we have to rely on our staff to help us, and maybe we sit down and have a real dialogue. But
Well, your budget has to be passed by June 30th.
Kirby.
understood, and that's I'm straddling the fence here a
Yeah,
little
but
bit.
in terms
The
of
24th.
in terms of next year, though, I mean, there is no for the 14-15. I don't think there's any other. What's getting us is the renovations that we need to do.
I respectfully disagree. What's getting us is that we have an operating budget that exceeds our revenues.
Right. I'm just saying what makes it look like a big hit this year is that.
To me, I'm not worried about the fund balance coming down, because we're spending money on capital projects that we all agree on, and we see the need with some of our buildings, and we want to do the right things, and we're making some great advancements in technology and buildings and security, and those are wonderful things to do. We need to do it. My biggest fear is the operating budget, where we're exceeding expenditures at a budget level by $2 million. So if your house, if my house, if we,
Well, in the past, that's how the fund balance got built to where it was. We were always, the budget,
Correct.
But it seems like we're trending now where it's hit the point where it's going the other way.
Correct.
Kirby, what was the millage rate that you used to come up with your estimated revenues?
I budgeted the value at 23.15 brought us this year, and therefore I have the same amount of money at 18.696 would generate.
18.6, okay, so
Right, it was a whole harmless concept.
okay,
So that's the number without the index.
That's correct.
thank you. Okay, so are we ready to vote on the 2013-2014 budget? Any other questions, concerns?
if
One? Yeah.
very short. So to reiterate, maybe this is done later, but I would like to reach out to the general board and say, if we were to approve a budget, I would hope that we would look at that short-term deficit and use it as motivation to say we recognize that this is not sustainable long-term. And let's enter into some very serious discussions now with the goal of, in this upcoming school year, evaluate every single expense, every single hiring. Maybe we go back 2 or 3 years and say, what have we hired in the last couple of years? Does all of that make sense? Is it all paying off? Let's look at every position and say, are we using them in the right way? If we have new requirements coming in that are forcing us, there's a certain number of positions that are required. And
Right. I do think the administration and under Mr. Pfeiffer's lead has talked about things like that. I see on the agenda where you're voting later tonight on the district-wide gifted position. And so that shifted, the art position has shifted and the gifted position has shifted. So you're not adding any people, but where they're being used is different because we're recognizing that you have to use the funds wisely and where's the need. And I would say the same about special education. We're talking about adding a teacher, but Mrs. Hudson and I were just talking about individual students this year that we did not have the level of service the IEP team felt that they needed. So if a child has to be placed out of district because we don't have the proper level of service, that could be as much as, like Mr. Christie said, $60,000 a student. So on one hand, you're hiring a teacher, but on another, you're helping to keep them in the district and lowering the expense of having them go to a private school somewhere else. So we have been, I think as an administrative team, trying to look at, the balances that you're asking about.
Good. To clarify, Kirby, the new teacher, is that a net number for new teaching positions?
You had to compare this year 115. In the 13-14 budget, there's 119 teaching positions.
Okay, so it's a net of 4. So
That's correct. And just to add to the discussion, you want to control your costs, it's salary and benefits. It's very simple, because that's what makes up this budget high percentage-wise. I don't have that percentage. But it's what you pay people and what kind of benefits they get. It's as simple as that.
Well, to a certain extent, though, I mean, the Peasers thing is money spent years ago, correct?
If you don't spend $1 on a salary, you don't pay the Peasers.
Okay, all right.
My point is, you've got contracts coming up in the next 3 years for all bargaining units. You also have contracts with Act 93 people who pay me a salary. You want to control your costs, you control your salary and benefits.
head count drives the expenditure. Okay.
Okay, so everyone's good? We'll do a roll call vote for the 2013-2014 budget with the, Katie, would you please call the roll?
You've got to put some numbers in first.
Yes, she
Yeah.
did.
What?
32, 224, 514. That was a number Kirby.
Are we doing number 4?
6,
No, we're
I'm
doing
sorry.
number 6. We're number
We-
6
we-
first. Okay.
Put the motion on, we're ready to vote on number 6.
Director Apple?
Well, I vote in favor of the general fund budget in the amount of 32,224, 514, whether that's an aye or...
That's a yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Let's go
Director
first.
Schell?
I am going to vote, I can add comment later, or do I comment now to my vote?
Well, your vote should just be yes or no.
Yes or no, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote yes.
Director Tessera?
Yes.
Director Wolkowiak?
Yes.
Director Schreiber?
Yes.
Director Sharippa?
No.
Director Bugan?
No.
Okay, so we,
That passed 5-2.
Director Wilson?
you have everybody that's here, so.
Everybody?
So motion number 6 passes 5-2. Okay, at this point,
Now, just to clarify on this motion, is it a 2/3?
No, 5.
Well, you need 5.
5 of the entire, yeah,
Of
you
the
need
entire
5
board.
of the entire
You need
board.
5
so-
votes.
Right,
Okay.
regardless of the number of people that are here.
Thank you.
so, and again, I'll ask Director Walkowiak to read number 4, and we will be needing to put in a millage.
Well, how should we go about that? Should we make a motion on millage and vote for that first?
Yes. Yeah.
May I make a comment just before you put
Yes.
that motion in? The law indicates that if you raise the millage, and in this case, we're talking about that 19.089, for the PDE budget process, you cannot have a fund balance greater than 8%. So I want the board to be aware that if they raise the millage, they are going to have to make a motion to move some money to an assigned estimated fund balance. And it's basically a paper motion. Once that money goes there, you can move it back into the unassigned at your convenience. And for the budgeting process, if you raise millage, you have to have less than 8% in an unassigned fund balance.
Are we
Trish, is that legal?
raising?
Moving money back and forth and not, I'm sorry.
Well,
That's okay. So,
you're moving it into an assigned fund balance. You're moving it into an assigned account,
So
so
next month we can move it back?
if you need it. If you need it.
If we need it.
Right, right. You can't just say, okay, oh, now we're moving it back, if you need it.
And that's my question.
And we've talked about this in the past, about assigning a certain amount of our fund balance because we have renovation projects we want to spend it, so.
That's the definition of assign.
Yeah, I
You're
thought-
assigning it for future uses such as healthcare, P,
Right.
renovation. But it doesn't preclude you in the future to say, we're not going to do that.
Right.
We're gonna move it back.
Right. Now, technically, are we reducing our millage? Because our millage is currently at 23.15. We're reducing it to some rate.
You're not.
Okay.
No.
The 18.696 is the revenue neutral number, so that is not decreasing it.
Okay.
To increase it to the 19.089.
Okay.
You're increasing it by the index.
And any value above 18.696 indicates that you're raising the millage. You're allowed to raise the millage up to the 2.1%, which is calculated out to 19.089. That's the max that you can do legally.
Okay.
So we will address that, but
Right.
for the time being,
Well, the question that I have is, based on what Kirby, you had stated, if we do raise it to 19.089, do we have to move a certain amount of money so that we only have 8%? Do you have a figure on that
Yeah.
for a motion to be raised? Okay, thank you. So then the first thing we need to do is to make a motion
Right,
to set the millage rate.
right.
I make a motion to set the millage rates at the recommendation of our business manager of 19.09%. I'm sorry, 19.089 mils.
Can we do that before moving?
Yes, you would make the motion, and then you would
And then
make the
we
motion to
fill in
raise
the
it,
blank.
and then you would have to assign money
Okay.
to
Yes.
an assigned account.
does anyone,
So moved.
and a
I
second?
made a motion.
Yeah, that was me.
19.089 mils or
Which is our business manager's recommendation.
Business manager's
Correct.
recommendation.
Do I have a second?
second.
Thank you. Any questions?
So what would the dollar amount on each $100 of these?
1.9089 on each $100.
So Trish,
Yep.
you're saying it's all right for us to basically play a game with taxpayer money by taking some of our fund balance and
No,
putting it in some kind of restricted.
no. It's okay to say we're going to take that money and put it into a fund that is assigned for that you are assigning it to spend on something in the fiscal year.
And we had done that in the past. We did that whenever we anticipated Peasers. I think
Currently on the
years
balance,
ago, we moved 400,000.
that's correct. Currently on the balance sheet, in the signed designation of our fund balance, is $400,000. And it's been sitting there for 2 years in that assigned account.
But it has to be named, so right?
If you could think of like a giant bucket, within the bucket is all the fund balance. There's designations in that particular bucket. Unassigned means that it can be spent on anything and whatever you want. The next level of, let's use the term restriction, is called assigned. You want to say that I'm planning down the road that we're going to be using this for certain things such as Peasers, such as healthcare, such as renovations. However, when I say it's more restricted, doesn't mean that down the road that you don't want to change your mind and move it back to the assigned. Okay? You're allowed to do that. I just want the board to be aware that by law, you can't have more than 8% of your unassigned fund balance, of which is $5.some million, would put us above that. Take 8%, a $32 million budget figure, it's more than the $5 million. So you would have to move approximately $3 million to the assigned fund balance.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I think there's enough money in the fund balance right now that we shouldn't be playing out this game, whatever game this is. I don't understand why moving money allows us to take more taxpayer money when we have a fund balance that is sizable.
So then your option is to keep the millage at 18.696.
That would be my preference, yeah.
Patty, a quick comment, just, I think you might have been at a Shasta meeting at one of the other meetings, but we did talk about it openly. I don't disagree with your position, I'm just saying we did talk about it. It was proposed that because I think when we looked at renovation projects that we were thinking about, nothing that we committed to, but a year ago, 6 months ago, we had a list of stuff that was like 10 and 12 and $15 million that we thought we wanted to do. And while we weren't approving that, I think we've approved 7, whatever so far, there was a recognition that we would eat up most, if not all, of our fund balance doing the things that we thought we needed to, and that for 3 or 4 meetings now, we've talked about possibly moving a portion of our current fund balance to this assigned status to recognize the fact that we have these projects that we'd like to line up to do, of which we've already okayed about 7 million of that. So I understand you're surprised because it feels awkward, but it's I guess a recognized practice, and it also recognizes our intentions as a board.
But is it fair for you and I to be paying the taxes now, when, say, you and I move in 10 years and the new people moving into our homes have their students come into this building, and we've paid more than our fair share, and theirs is reduced, and they have students in the building, theirs is reduced because you and I have paid the heavier load up front?
Well, I think the reason why, I mean, just to get to the point, is the reason why I made the motion. I think if you listen to the business manager, I think Kirby's concern is it's multiple. I mean, he realizes what's coming down the road, first of all, because we don't have revenues that meet expenditures for a number of reasons. You know, the state and the federal government are involved. It's the head count that we have, the health care, and also the PESers that we need to deal with. But the reason that I made the motion for this case is because of the unknowns concerning taxes. If you listen to what he initially said, he's hedging his concerns about not having the actual revenues that we're predicting because of the appeals that are still ongoing, Kirby?
Yes.
And that we will not know until next year or so.
You won't know until they're satisfied at the county level.
Exactly. So I think at this point in time, I mean, I hear his concerns, and I see the concerns that this whole school district is going to have down the road. I think at this point in time, knowing that, I think you stated that even though I said referendum's an option, it's not an option. And if we don't use this at this time to at least hedge what we may lose and what we probably will lose to some degree, and nobody can predict what that degree is. And we know that we're deficit spending at this point. By this year, a prediction of $2 million, whether or not that actually occurs at the end of the year. This is something that if we don't make this move now, it'll only put us in a worse position in the future.
I just see it as a position where we will guard our money a little more closely if we put our cautionary flags up now.
Understand that, but at the same time, I mean,
that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, at the same time, I realize that, and I think that we need to, we need to take a step back.
But I can't vote for this.
We need that. I understand that.
Thank you.
But we need to pull back, and we need to do a thorough examination of how we actually do reduce that. And even though we're approving this budget, which you didn't agree with, and I respect that, we're not saying that we're going to spend it all. Typically, every year we don't. So, am I right, Kirby?
In the past, that's true.
That's been true.
However, what's
It's
coming down
changing.
the
I
pike
understand that.
is changing because of the tremendous increase in the PESers rate, and also that the health care 7% is very high.
Right.
So,
And let me say that this is less than 0.4 of a mil of an increase, which equates to the $250,547. It's around 0.4. I mean, for the benefit of the public, so that the public understands.
yes,
And the impact that that has on that $2 million deficit that we just approved,
Right.
so to speak, potentially.
Right.
You know, again, there's a lot of discussion we need to have as far as adding the staff and the things that we want to do. But again, I just wanted to point out that at Kirby's concern, and I think it's the whole board's concern, I think that you have the opportunity now to understand where we're at, and that's the reason why I proposed this, because I can see coming down the road that this is going to be a huge problem if we don't act now. That's all.
Any other comments?
I think, too, we have to change a lot of mindset. in that we've got to start scrutinizing every single purchase that comes, or every single add-on that we have, and take the lead of, say, Mount Lebanon, who is now doing pay for play on the athletic department. We've just got to stop the spending. Thank you.
I agree, we need to look at everything
We've
closely.
got to start looking closely.
Katie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
What are we voting on now?
Number,
The millage. well,
Number 4.
I made a
On 4.
motion
Okay.
for the increased millage rate.
Director Apple?
Yes.
Director Schoen?
Yes.
Director Cesaro?
Yes.
Director Walkowiak?
Yes.
Director Sharippa?
No.
Director Schreiber?
Yes.
Director Yugen?
No.
So that motion passes 5-2.
Now, could I also have the dollar value for the other blank?
Well, we want
on
to, would you like to make that motion?
Number 4?
Oh, that was, I think that was part of it, I think.
Yeah, I made the
Mis-
comment,
Mr.
it's
Christie said it.
1.9089 on each $100 of assessed value.
Thank you. I didn't
And
write that down.
at this time, we would want to make a motion to,
Yeah, the board needs to make a motion to move all but 8% of the estimated ending unassigned fund balance to a estimated ending assigned fund balance. You move all but 8% out of the estimated 13-14 unassigned fund balance to an estimated ending assigned fund balance.
And if we don't?
You legally can't,
well,
you can't do it.
When it gets signed.
Kirby, do you have an approximate dollar amount?
Yes.
No.
Okay, that's what we need to,
That figure is approximately $3,171,000 approximately.
That needs to be moved or that needs to remain or cannot exceed?
8% of the $32 million that we passed is $2,577,318. That's what will remain in the unassigned fund balance. 8% times 32, 224,514, $2,577,318.
so,
We need to move all but 8% into an assigned balance. That's estimated to be $3,171,000.
okay, so Mr. Walkowiak, would you make that motion?
I'd like to make a motion to move all but 8% of our unassigned fund balance to an assigned fund balance. That amount being approximately $3,171,000. Would that be correct, Kirby?
I would suggest that you indicate the reason that you're signing it for future expenditures related to Caesar's increase, future health care increases, and future renovation of school buildings.
Do you agree?
I agree.
Is there a first?
And again, it's for the 13-14 school year budget, PD 2028, is what this is representing.
So moved.
Got all that? Gotcha.
Well, Mr. Walkowiak made the motion, so.
Oh, yeah, second.
Any questions, comments?
This is not the dogs.
So at the end of this year, if there's money left in here, then we can move it back into the,
If everything hit, the document that we're going to send to the state, you would have $5,748,318 of fund balance, which is committed, assigned, and unassigned. You will be able to then, next year, in the 13-14 school year, to do an actual dollar, if you wanted to move money, you can certainly do that at the end of the audit, or any time during the school year, as your desire. Because your plans might change in 6 months.
But at the same time, we could take some of this next year and take this and put it into the budget to cover PSERS and healthcare
That's
increases.
correct. That's correct.
Or if we have additional renovations, we'll be spending out of that assigned bucket some of that money.
Ready for a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Patty? Okay. And, okay, so it's 6-1. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Motion number 5, a resolution number 456-13 as follows. Resolve that the levy of 1% on...
Excuse me. Did we actually make the resolution on number 4? Because I never did read that. I know we made the motion to approve the 19.08.
Yeah, you moved.
We're okay on that?
Yes,
Okay,
you moved
all
and
right.
seconded number
Okay,
4.
All right, just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure. That conned.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
stop reading.
It was a
It
roll
was a
call.
roll call.
Oh, I just heard,
The
Number
last,
4.
the last one.
Yeah.
The last one. for the
Was not.
movement.
yeah, I thought that should have been a roll call.
Well, nothing is actually legally required to be a roll call. The only requirement is that the secretary is able to determine who votes for what. A lot of boards, as a procedure, do any 508 votes as a roll call, but it's nothing's legally required to be a roll call.
But basically, we have the roll
But you
call.
did on number 4. Yeah, you did on number 4 have a roll call.
So continuing with number 5, 1% on all earned income and net profit levied by resolution number 44 of 1966 and enacted under the authority of the Local and Tax Enabling Act number 511 of 1965 and its amendments hereto is hereby renewed for the 2013-2014 fiscal year and for an indefinite term thereafter, and all taxes levied under Act 511 of 1965, including the earned income and net profits tax and real estate transfer tax, be reenacted without substantial change.
What might that mean, substantial change?
It means that you're not changing the earned income tax rate that we're levying. It's 1% of which we receive 0.5%. Not changing the real estate transfer tax levy. We're receiving 1% of which we receive 0.5%. So all it is a housekeeping motion that we keep on the agenda to make people aware that these taxes are out there and that we're not changing them. However, there is the possibility in the future that you might want to change it.
But on this one, I guess I'm questioning the wording. Would it not be correct to say just without change, if nothing is changing for this year?
I'll just make the acknowledgement that this motion was what was given to us several years ago by the council of our early ones.
Okay.
Perhaps a different council might have a different opinion.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I don't have an opinion to change it. I mean,
Okay.
it's fine.
And we're discussing before we have a second. Do we have a second on this? Second, we've got a second. So any questions, comments before we vote? All those, oh, I'm sorry.
Just that this is just a procedural move that we do this every year. We do this.
Correct.
You have to levy your taxes every year. So,
Right. And it's the same, it's,
Right.
as far as I remember,
Keeping
it's
the rate
always
the
been the
same.
same.
Yeah.
So.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So it's 7-0. Kirby, do you have a number for number 7?
Just briefly, the state has indicated that we're going to receive $557,985.99 related to the Act 1 gambling money. There's approximately 3,440 properties that have been authorized from the county of Allegheny. So the figure that approximately what each taxpayer will receive is $162. That comes in the form of a assessment reduction. So that assessment reduction, I'll do the calculation based on the tax rate that was set. You'll see that on the tax bill. It will generate approximately $162.
And that is the benefit of the casino gambling money.
Right. You have the option of saying we don't want the gambling money. However, if you say no the following fiscal year, you have to put it on the up for a vote at the primary.
Yep.
People are going to say, I want my $162.
Yeah, let's not discuss.
So I'll move it and then we can have discussion. I will move the resolution number 457-13 submitted by the solicitor to accept the funds made available through Act 1, the Homestead Farmstead Tax Relief Act. Each qualified homeowner will recognize a savings of approximately $162. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? We can vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Number 8, designate PNC Bank, Crafton Branch as the official school district depository for funds received for fiscal year 2013-2014 in accordance with Section 621 of the PA School Code. Is there a second?
So moved.
Thank you. And any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Number 9, participation in the UPMC Workers' Compensation Program at the cost of $69,820, effective July 1, 2013, as presented. Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Yes. How does that compare to the previous year, Kurt?
Last year, we paid $53,459, which is an increase of $16,361. That's a 30% increase. The reason for that jump is that our estimated payroll is up 6%. The rate went up 1.5%. But the biggest item that's causing that to jump is we had some bad experience with an injury. We have an individual that's been out on workers' comp for approximately 2 years. Come November, that individual is going against our experience, which is creating our modification factor that's used in the calculation to go up dramatically. So these rates are going to basically be high for 3 years because of this one individual that has a claim outstanding.
Any other questions? All those in favor, vote.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Number 10, the insurance package for the 2013-2014 school year as recommended by the Gleason Agency at a cost of $68,228. This includes cyber liability.
Second.
Any questions?
Is this again similar to last year's or?
Last year, we paid $65,782. This is an increase of $2,446 from last year, which is a 3.7% increase. And the biggest reason for that is the increase in our property values.
Due to the reassessment?
Yeah, we have an appraisal done every year. They come in with our property.
Any other comments or questions? Take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Number 11, that Patricia Keeley, Crafton Real Estate Tax Collector, Edward Adams, Roslyn Farms Real Estate Tax Collector, and Peg Bowman, Carnegie Real Estate Tax Collector, be excused from further collection of school district real estate taxes for the 2012-2013 school year, effective June 30th, 2013, and that the list of names of those owners submitted by each of the above tax collectors be given to the delinquent tax collector for the purpose of liening. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Again, is this a procedure that we've done the same way each year, and is it changed in any way, or is this the same?
No, once a year, when they're done, we turn those books over to our Weiss in conjunction with Warren Tax, and they go to lien the properties. Also, we're required by our bonding companies that we exonerate them from collecting anymore. So the bonding company knows that they're done for that particular year.
Okay.
Okay, take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. 12, renew public official bonds for Board Secretary Kirby Christie and Treasurer Sandra Hugan.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Number 13, grant authorization for the appropriate officials to provide tax duplicates to each of the district's tax collectors on or before July 1, 2013, in accordance with Section 682 of the PA School Code. Have a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. 14, authorize the district to acquire the tax collector's bonds as required by Section 684 of the PA School Code for the Carnegie, Crafton, and Roslyn Farms tax collectors.
Second.
Comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. 15, award bids for physical education, medical, custodial maintenance, and athletic supplies for the 2013-2014 school year in the total amount of $92,230.40. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions?
Again, comparison to previous years, Kirby, how we looking?
This number is down from last year. There was more money bid on last year, I believe, for athletic supplies.
Okay.
But there's no rhyme or reason from year to year when you compare the things that they go out to bid. We ask people to give us what they expect to use in the next year to go so we can get the best pricing. We set the budget in discussions with Mr. Piper, how much they want to give them to be budgeted, and then we ask them to go out and give us what they want to have bid. So this year, I believe the athletic supplies are less than in the previous years. The custodial maintenance is probably similar.
Any other questions? We'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. 16, the letters of agreement for SAP services between the district and Chartiers Mental Health Mental Retardation Center for the 2013-2014 school year as presented. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? Take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. 17, the purchase of Pearson Common Core Algebra 1 and Geometry Mathematics textbooks at a cost of $27,821.56 as reviewed by the classroom teachers and recommended by administration. Is there a second?
Second.
Comments and questions?
I have one question. Is, for what grade level is this?
These are the secondary classes, Algebra 1 and Geometry at the high school.
So 7th, 8th grade? 8th, 9th grade?
Hey, we're able to utilize for the advanced algebra for the Algebra 1.
Yeah, this is used for the Algebra 1 courses that they do 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade.
And this comes at the recommendation of?
The teachers who reviewed and worked on we've got the 3 curriculum adjusted to the Common Core, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry, and Biology as well.
Because I know we had a teacher in our math department that had written a book that was allegedly aligned to the Common Core. We considered it a year or two ago. I don't know if we...
But the texts have to be research-based, to justify the purpose and when we're going through it. And that was the department and the teachers recommended these by Pearson.
Okay, so the department and the teachers recommended. Very good. Okay.
Any other
And
questions?
it's also recommended by administration, that's in the motion, because if textbooks are not recommended by administration, then it requires 2/3 vote of the board. If it is recommended by administration, 5 votes.
Can we take a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. 18, the purchase of Edge LVLC National Geographic for Literature remediation textbooks at a cost of $3,134.01 as reviewed by classroom teachers and recommended by administration. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah, what drove the purchase of this? Was this tied into Keystone's BSSA?
All right, now this one is coming down at the elementary level, isn't it?
I think this was something that would, Mrs. Burns probably be easier to answer because it came from the English Language Arts Department of high school.
Right.
But I think, from my recollection of the beginning of the conversations, I believe it was about the remediation of the Keystone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Under personnel, motion number 1, the following professional education assignments for the 2013-2014 school year as presented. Adrian Monahan, Elementary, Crafton Grade 4. Tracy Alex, RTI, Crafton. Scott Donnelly, Elementary, Carnegie, Grade 6. Joy Buda, Special Ed, Elementary, Carnegie. Michelle Durenza, Halftime Art, junior high halftime Crafton. Zeffie Carroll, gifted district-wide. Sherry Lee, guidance Carnegie. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any comments and questions?
I have a question. On this art teacher, is this a new hire?
No, she's currently the halftime art in the elementary or high
Right,
school.
and
And
halftime.
halftime gate.
Up here.
So
She's gate
that's
up here.
high school,
Junior, senior.
9 through 12.
She's going to be art up here.
She's going to be art up
Because
here.
we had a gate and a half for a small district. So gate's going to be just one person, K through 12.
Right, so.
And then the art's going to be halftime there and halftime here to
So
give
what
some
Mary
more art
Beth Berry
class.
did, plus Michelle Zorinda, is now one position, correct?
Right.
Right,
Correct.
Right.
Michelle Zorinda's
Right.
going to do halftime art at both buildings, and then
Okay.
Zeffie Carroll's going to be gate, K through 12.
All right.
So it's a net, there were 2 people, and now there's still 2 people.
These are just, you're just voting on their professional education assignments.
Right.
So these are all current.
This comes out of the
We
bid
did that.
round robin that they had last week.
But we did restructure gate and art to gain a halftime art position and create the gifted ed as just a one person taking K through 12.
Do we know if the participation levels of GATE have gone down, or do we have fewer students, or?
We do know that. That's why I was saying we were able to meet the needs of students without adding any positions. But if you look at the ratios of what's needed in the elementary schools, the numbers are lower. The needs are lower at the elementary schools than they were in the past.
So the numbers of students participating has gone down?
Right.
So adding the halftime art position up here, what does that get us?
Well, it gives you kids
What is she
more
gonna be
opportunities to
teaching?
hit some of those electives.
Right, so this is for the entire 7 through 12, or is it, she's going to be concentrating, because there is an art teacher for,
That's right, Marlon Vallanos.
Okay.
But we only had one fine arts teacher for 7 to 12 in this building.
okay,
So it gives us a little leeway with scheduling.
great.
And Sherry Lee, guidance down at Carnegie, is that a new position that we've ever had?
No, but if we go to have another elementary school counselor, right now Sherry Lee has to go back and forth between the 2 buildings. So we almost have to post her at one so that we can advertise for the other elementary counselor.
Did Sherry Lee go back and forth between the 2 buildings before?
Oh, yeah? But then the kids aren't being serviced, then, Hillary or somebody else would have to try to pick up the slack.
So you're going to now advertise for a new position? Is
Yes,
what you're telling
that's
me?
one of the 4.
It was a mess.
Any other comments or questions? We'll take a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
No.
Opposed? Okay. So it's a 5-2, the motion carries. Number 2, the letter to rescind the letter of intent to retire as submitted by Janine Butts for the continued employment in the Carnegie School District, Carlynton School District, I'm sorry. Second?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Number 3, the letter to rescind the letter of intent to retire as submitted by Rosemary Olitz with continued employment in the Carlynton School District. Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. 4, the letter to rescind the retirement date of Carol Nightingale with a new retirement date of September 6 or September 13th, 2013, as submitted. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Comments or questions?
Just a quick question. With these changes, does this affect, have we reached out to new people to hire new people and then have to backtrack at all, or is this standard? Does this?
Contract isn't negotiated yet, so they can resend the very last day of school, which they did.
Okay,
They had to put it in by a certain date, and then had to resend it.
okay.
And what's so late about it is that it is in a contract negotiation year where we haven't had an agreement yet.
Okay.
It wasn't negotiated yet.
Okay.
Okay, we ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. 5, the following individuals as summer maintenance helpers for the period of June 17th, 2013 through August 16, 2013, as submitted. Dave Kirchner, Tom Kelsey, Gary McCuskey. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Comments or
Are
questions?
these additional positions that are added on above what was originally asked?
Well, every summer,
We
our
already
custodians,
approved some previously.
Well,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Yes, okay. You are correct.
these are custodians that become maintenance.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Number 6, award temporary professional employee contracts to the following for the 2013-2014 school year under the terms of the Carlynton Federation of Teachers Collective Bargaining Unit Agreement. Nathan Milson, in-school suspension, junior, senior high. Jennifer Harger, special education, English, junior, senior high. Jalen Sapsera, elementary, craft and grade 4. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Comments or questions?
At this point, because of just going off of the budget discussions, do we hold off on the in-school suspension, or do we, does the board want to have discussion on that and maybe vote on it next time, or is the board feeling like, all right, we've got the money in the budget?
Well, I think one of the things that Jim said is that we need to have a discussion on this. So I think that, I don't know, would it be an issue as far as holding off until the next meeting to have the discussion when we have hopefully a larger board here? Would it hurt us? Would it hurt us at this point?
You know, I think if we hold off till, our next meeting is July 22nd. We go to the people and let them know, you know, that's going to put them in the job market to look, and they may decide to do so.
If your only issue is the in-school suspension, and I'm not sure what your situation is, if Jennifer Harger and Jalen Sapsera are replacing people, you can amend the motion to not include the in-school suspension, if that's the position you want to discuss.
One of these positions, Lee, one of the ones that you must have? No.
Well, it's replacing the person who would move into the autistic support.
Which is a new position.
Right, but the autistic support one is one that's sort of being dictated by this.
I don't know how we would not provide that service. Last year, the life skills classroom was at 11 students. So I have more than 10 students coming from early intervention, more than 10. I don't know what level they're all going to need, but I know some of them have pretty severe needs. So out of those 10, some of them are going to need this level of support, and I can't go past 12 or I'm already at 11.
Legally, you don't have a choice on that.
Right.
I don't.
Why would we hire before we know what the count is?
Well, I know that there are 10 students coming.
I understand,
Okay.
but I'm just asking, why would we hire before we know what the actual count is? I'm not asking you, Lee, I'm asking the board.
Okay.
When you say there's 10 students coming,
There are 10 students, more than 10 students already in service, in special education services pre-K. So some of them are in private schools because they have severe needs. They're all in some sort of early intervention, and they've been identified as needing special education.
so in addition to the 11 you currently
I have 11
you know of 10 that,
that are coming next year into kindergarten.
okay, so that's 20.
Plus the three
So you're
learning
doubling the
kids
number.
that currently could be supported by life
Yeah.
skills that aren't because of the need of their classroom. So
So
that are currently enrolled.
To Patty's point, we don't know the exact number, but you're highly confident that it's going
It'll
to
be
well
more than,
exceed
yeah.
Yes.
If
our
it's
threshold.
more than one.
Right.
I was thinking it was 10
Total.
total. but
No,
it's
I have
20.
more than
No,
10
she's-
coming into kindergarten who have already been identified as needing special education prior to kindergarten.
Right.
What is that third person going to be doing?
I think she was a long-term sub.
Jalen, she was a long-term sub, so she's been with the district for 3 years, and it was class size or alignment. So the Crafton teacher went to RTI, the other fourth grade teacher went to RTI. Fourth grade went to 3 sections, so
Yeah,
Third grade.
third grade in Crafton
Third, yes,
last year
thank
was
you.
3 sections, so they're moving up one grade, so they need to.
and one of the third grade teacher went to the RTI position, so that they had to hire one.
Ms. Cavanis. And that all started by retirement. Ms. Cavanis retired. So there was an open position to fill, and it was just the bumping.
Yes.
So are these new hires or are they replacements? I
Jalen.
realize the first one is not.
Jalen would be replacement.
She's a replacement for a retired.
Yes.
Kirby, you can, Eric?
I don't know the,
Oh, so.
Well, that one,
I don't know what the number.
it's a, the net gain is from this, from Jennifer and Jalen would be, there would be no net gain.
The RTI teacher at Crafton resigned. She,
Retired.
not retired, she resigned. Like 3
Is
board
she
meetings ago.
replacing somebody?
She
Oh,
resigned.
okay, I'm thinking, I'm sorry.
So there was a permanent sub in that position. So when she resigned, Tracy Alex, who does she teach 3rd or 4th grade? She teaches 4th grade. Tracy took
Didn't come
the
back.
RTI position. Therefore, there was an opening at Crafton, and that's where Jalen was teaching kindergarten in a long-term sub. And she taught kindergarten at Carnegie for the contract, and that's where she got the next the open contract. Does that make you follow me? Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a net.
So everybody,
It's a net.
everybody but Nate is it's a net zero. It's a filling a position through a retirement.
And Nate's a current employee.
No, that's, Jennifer Harger is a +1.
Would she be, yes. She'd be the +1 from the special ed position, because Joy was in that
Joy would
position.
move, right.
Join.
Can we vote on these?
Individually?
Thank you, yes.
Well, you would have to amend the motion, because the motion has been made and seconded, so you would have to, somebody would have to make a motion to amend.
Who made the motion?
I did.
Could you amend it, please?
To read,
Individually. We'll do each one individually.
Well, part of the discussion with the in-school suspension
Oh,
was,
well, we're not finished with the discussion, sorry.
yeah, part of the discussion with the in-school suspension was, do we hold off on that one until the next meeting? Because,
Well,
just to have the.
What's difficult with that is you're going to approve the disciplinary policy, and the
Right.
in-school suspension is embedded in disciplinary policy. So you almost have to, they have to go hand in hand. Now, you know, setting up the room where he's going to be relocated to, the room's been designated. You know, I think, again, to go, all the work the teachers did to revise the discipline policy, and then to get this late in the game and say, well, we're going to hold off. You know, it's not just position, it's, well, aren't they approving the policy that we put forth and spent all this time into? Plus, again, I think you're going to have Nate, who's dedicated a lot of time to the district as AD and day-to-day sub. And again, he's got a chance of losing him because, you know, he's going to feel like he's getting jerked around.
Okay, so we can amend it to vote individually.
and it appears that the positions that are currently we would not be voting on that are in the budget that we're not all sure about would be still the elementary counselor at Crafton and the dean of discipline.
Right.
And the 3 data aides.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So, I move to amend this motion to read, award temporary professional employee contracts for Nate Milson in school suspension, junior, senior, high school. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Would you please repeat that?
I move to award a temporary professional employee contract to Nathan Milson in school suspension, junior, senior, high school. So we're going to take a vote for those that are willing to have Nate be approved tonight. I would ask that we take a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Director Apple?
Yes.
Director Shell?
Yes.
Director Sarah?
Yes.
Director Wachovia?
Yes.
Director Sharippa?
No.
Director Bugan?
No.
And Director Schreiber.
And Director Schreiber?
Yes.
The motion carries 5-2. Thank you. I move to award a temporary professional employee contract to Jennifer Harger, special education, English, junior, senior, high. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Ken, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Director Apple?
Yes.
Director Shell?
Yes.
Director Tesoro?
Yes.
Director Rokoviac?
Yes.
Director Sharippa?
No.
Director Schreiber?
Yes.
Director Yugen?
Yes.
The motion carries 6-1. I move to award a temporary professional employee contract to Jalen Sepsera, Elementary, Crafton, Grade 4. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? Take a roll call vote.
Director Apple?
Yes.
Director Shell?
Yes.
Director Tesoro?
Yes.
Director Rokoviac?
Yes.
Director Sharippa?
Yes.
Director Schreiber?
Yes.
Director Yugen?
Yes.
The motion carries. Do we need to take motion off the table where I
No,
read?
you amended
Okay.
it.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, policy. 1, the revisions to the following policies in conjunction with the junior-senior high school code of conduct and per the review and recommendation of the solicitor. 218, student discipline. 221, dress and grooming. 227, electronic devices. Is there a second?
I second.
Comments or questions?
And I submitted this earlier when we were in the process of talking this, I don't know, 3 meetings ago or something. One of the comments that I had that I'm still wondering about, under abuse, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, which is page 3 of 14 for policy 218, there's no mention of staff as a target there, although there's mention of staff under classroom disturbances. Under this intimidation, bullying section, does the staff need to be included at that point? Is it okay as it is? That was just a question I had that just got lost in the shuffle, I guess.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, because Mrs. Burns isn't here.
Well, I mean, as long as that is covered in your discipline code, typically bullying does not involve a student bullying a teacher. That would generally fall under some other category. So as long as it is covered somewhere in the policy, so that if you have a situation where a student is doing something to a teacher, then that is covered. Let me also say, in a student discipline policy, it is generally impossible to cover every single action that may or may not come up in school. So there are also usually, in policies and student code of conduct, catch-all phrases as well that say things like an action that would disrupt the educational process.
Right.
So that you have leeway when you have a situation where it doesn't fit perfectly into one of your already listed categories. So, I mean, in my opinion, as long as it is listed, as long as it is covered somewhere, it doesn't necessarily have to be covered 2, 3, 4.
Okay, it doesn't have, okay. And then probably along the same vein, on page 5 of 14 in the same 218, that students, this is under film, photograph, and record, students are prohibited from using electronic devices to film daily events in school. This includes class lessons without the permission of the teacher and events in the hallways. So the class lessons are called out, the events in the hallways are called out. Do the locker rooms and bathrooms need to be called out as well, or film daily events in school cover that?
I think it is covered.
It covers that, okay. Just wanted to be sure, and I think that was, for the dress and grooming.
They're in the locker rooms and bathrooms as part, during the school day, as,
Right.
either, that's the bathrooms are in the hallways, so that's covered
and I
in the
think
hallways.
there's mention.
The locker rooms are
Right.
typically in there as part of a class or curriculum.
And then, under dress and grooming, page 3 of 3, they talk about head covering, and that exceptions will be made for religious head coverings. Do we need to call it medical exceptions as well?
No, again, I don't have the policies in front of me, but my guess is, that there, any time that administration gives somebody permission to do something, then that would be an exception to your policy.
Okay, so like a parent reading this wouldn't have to worry like, oh my gosh, you're going to be in violation, but it's
You know,
okay.
I think anybody who has an exception would call and notify the
Right.
principal.
And it would be okay, and didn't need to be specifically called out at that
Exactly.
point. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Student services, we have to approve a disciplinary matter. But how should that motion read? Because we,
That's exactly how it should.
Okay, to approve the disciplinary matter of student number 0613-E03. Any comments or questions? All those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed?
I abstain. I was
Okay.
not in the
Joe
discussion.
Apple is abstained, so the motion carries. Does anybody on the board have any old business that they would like to discuss at this time? Does anybody have any new business that they would like to discuss?
If no one else has any, I'd like to see if we...
Excuse me, we do have one more motion, I apologize.
Okay.
Under new business, I would make the motion to authorize the superintendent to investigate waste proposals and enter into an agreement for services for the contract to be ratified in July.
Second.
Any comments or questions? And any public comment on the approval of waste services? It's a new added. Okay, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, vote aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. One other quick question. We didn't, do you want that motion on there about authorizing?
Yeah.
Okay, we need to put another motion on to, I move to authorize the superintendent, I move for the superintendent to be authorized, to authorize change orders for the construction renovation for an amount not to exceed $15,000 in an emergency situation. Any comments or questions?
I just want the caveat that, Gary, you will phone us when
Yes,
these
absolutely.
emergency change orders do come up. Thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely.
And this figure comes from our...
At the advice of the construction manager.
Yes, John Thomas made the recommendation.
Right, so it's not a number that we just pulled out of a hat or
No.
something?
No.
And
That's
this
his
is in the interest of all the projects that are going on at the 3 schools, should anything arise, that we don't want to hold up the work, as we're already on a tight schedule to try to get as much as this done in the summer. Any other questions? Take a vote. All those in favor? And any public comment on the authorization for the superintendent to approve change orders? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Mr. Pfeiffer, is that all you needed from us tonight?
Yes, that
Okay.
is.
Okay, any other board members with new business then, at this point?
I elect Jim
To go first.
to go first.
So I was just going to say, given our earlier discussion, and with the intent of not having our institutional memory fail us too quickly, I'd like to propose that we have a discussion about how we approach this upcoming school year and how we look back a few years and how we look forward a few years and how we analyze budget numbers and head count and job descriptions and whatever else we want to do, but recognizing collectively that the direction we're headed financially is not sustainable long-term, but our standards continue to be high. Let's get creative. Let's have a nice dialogue, and what should that look like? When can we start those discussions? And so I'm just throwing that out.
You know, I think we did have a board retreat, and I think the superintendent had talked about maybe
Summer.
doing that again, and that would be perhaps a good place to start with that.
And we're also working on a comprehensive plan, which is due at the end of November, so this can fill right into that as we map things out.
So as a follow-up, is it appropriate for me to ask us all to validate our individual interests in having that discussion, just as a way to provide Mr. Pfeiffer with direction as far as, yes, this is a collective desire of us to take a critical look at our expenditures and our revenues and delve into any particular areas that we need to programmatically to validate it, or have you bring to the table things, or have Mr. Kirby bring to the table things that can help us evaluate our current position and then where we go. So.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we need to do is looking forward is we need to prioritize, because we realize that we can't have everything that we want.
Right.
So we need to have that hit list of priorities of what are the most important issues globally that affect the school district.
Yep.
So I think that that's really the next step that we need to take, because without that, we'll just waddle and, onesie-twosie. But we really need to set those priorities based on justifications and then move forward.
So is that a forward?
And that's of course, I'm not talking about just spending, I'm talking about looking at ways to reduce costs as well.
I think we should reach out and talk to other school districts, because we're not alone in this. And so many bright, thoughtful thinking people who are already on the boards from all across our Allegheny County, they have ideas also. And maybe they could be very resourceful in coming to us and say, hey, how about this? Try this one. Or let's research this avenue as far as cutting expenses. I know whenever I go to replace you over at Parkway, I have a very good talk every now and then with the lady who is a representative from Upper St. Clair. Wow, they are getting so many cutbacks on their expenses over there at Upper St. Clair. And we've just got to reach out to other school districts and find out how they are doing it. Read the newspaper. You see that Pittsburgh City Schools, they're closing down schools and laying people off. I don't profess that we should do that, obviously. But I think there are some things that can be said from very helpful individuals at other school districts.
What if,
Amen.
our next board meeting is July 22nd. What if all the board members perhaps shared their individual thoughts with Mr. Pfeiffer on what they're looking for and what they are thinking about in the future, what ideas they might have, what things they could share, and then he could assimilate a list, because we probably all have a lot that are the same, shared interests, but we could perhaps generate some new ideas.
And might I suggest that, the Bible that Kirby gave us that really sets the budget, the comparison of one year versus the other. I mean, I think that's where you're going to see your concerns on the cost side.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good starting point, and just reviewing that and going back. And I wished I would have had that with me tonight. I wouldn't have had to ask Kirby so many questions as far as the cost, but, that
I
is.
apologize, I got extra copies.
You do?
Well, we're about ready to open it up for open forum, so next time.
I'll take it home with me and bring back a lot of questions for July 22nd.
Any other new business from the board? This time, I'd like to open it up for the public. Does anyone have any? Would you please state your name and where you're from?
My name's Amanda Coley. I live in Carnegie. My son is William. He's in 8th grade here. The reason I came up this evening was I'm having some very serious communication issues with the high school. And I don't know how to address that. So I came up here to speak to the board about that, because since the fall, I've been having those issues. And one thing I did not know was that our principal had left, and I was working with him with the issues with my son, with his concussion from football. And if I would have known that the principal wasn't here, I would have spoke to somebody else. But I found out very late that the principal was not here. So when I spoke to the assistant, she had no idea about my son's condition there, which I found odd that, the communication is just not there with the principal and the assistant principal or anybody else in the office of the school. I think I spoke to the superintendent once a little bit about the situation with a couple of things about that. Is that you guys spoke to?
Yes, if you called the superintendent, you spoke with me.
I know there was a little bit of that, but there was a lot of changes in the school and different things, but I'm just having a very hard time getting across to certain people and with guidance counselor. I'm having issues with trying to get in touch with him. Even my son reached out to him and he's ignored, and I'm not understanding. I mean, I see that you guys are trying to get your staff in order, but I just wish that there's more notification to parents when something major like that happens in school. And like I said, I was working with Dr. Sassini about things with my son with his one class that he had a problem with. And then I found out very late in the game that the principal and the teacher made arrangements with certain things, and then it's too late to do anything.
I was just going to say, perhaps you could contact Mr. Pfeiffer and...
Again, if I may, yeah.
Sure.
I talked to Mrs. Michael before, and so I'm going to meet with her tomorrow as
Oh,
well.
okay.
I just don't understand a lot of the communication issues. I wish they weren't as bad as they are up here. I wish that, I understand Mrs. Burns had a lot on her plate, and I can't blame her for not knowing my situation, but I just wish that things were a lot different. My son is suffering for the communication issues, and now I've lately lost one too. So.
Well, I think if you're set to meet with Ms. Myford, you'll get some action, and I'm sorry for what has happened in the past, but we understand if you're set to meet with her, I think we can go forward.
I
And
hope
hope.
so. But like I said, it's just so late in the game now with the school season being over that I just don't know how the situation is going to be fixed. So I'm just hoping that.
Well, let me just ask a simple question. Were you trying to contact Dr. Sassini?
I did. I spoke to him.
Were you leaving voice messages or something like that?
Yes, I was.
Well, I think that a simple solution, and you weren't getting return calls, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think just a simple solution is when somebody's out long-term like that, those calls, we have an electronic system here. One thing that could happen here that I would recommend is that those calls are forwarded to somebody, so that if this does occur again, that this will go directly to the assistant principal, so that calls aren't left in a voicemail that are unattended. So I think that's something just internally that could be changed just to help, just to allow the process to continue to flow, so to speak. Even though it's not going to be with the same person, but if somebody's out long-term for whatever reason, just so that a call can be returned in a reasonable amount of time.
Yes, that's
Okay.
reasonable.
But thank you for coming up before us to let us know, and we'll make sure that someone takes care of you, starting with your meeting tomorrow. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Oh, could you?
All right, so hi.
Hi.
I'm Becca Chanette. If you don't know me, I am actually a music teacher here at the Junior Senior High School. The past 2 years I've taught chorus in grades 7 to 12, as well as the male and female ensembles in the junior high chorus. Basically, throughout my few years here, we've had several issues regarding the scheduling of the students in both band and choir, all the different ensembles as well. We've brought forth those issues to people making the schedule, and communication has just not moved as we would have hoped, and actually we've had every year more and more issues with the scheduling, resulting in either fracturing of classes where, say, the high school band, which I believe should have over 60 members of it this year, Instead of seeing them all together as one ensemble, as you would expect, it's split into 3 different periods throughout the day, one of which only has 6 kids in it. And then when you figure some of those kids, I think it ended up being like 4 of them were flute, one was a horn, and one was percussion. It's a little bit hard to follow the curriculum. Likewise, with chorus, it's split up over several periods a day, and when you have different voice parts, it makes it very, very difficult to follow the curriculum and to use the lesson plans that we should be using. Likewise, because of scheduling and the way that it's been created this year, the senior high chorus, for example, based on this past year's numbers, should have approximately 90 students in it, and currently scheduled is 48. So that's about half of the students who have requested it are not getting it in their schedules, purely based on how the schedule is built. Many of them have study halls in their schedule, but the way things are built, they're just not getting it getting to class. And it's just been an ongoing problem we've addressed, and we've been told, oh, it's too late in the game for this year, but next year, and we've stayed, kept the communication lines open throughout the school year, and then by the time we get information on what the next school year is going to be like, we're consistently told, oh, now it's too late again. So we just wanted to bring that to the attention, because between band and chorus, we teach probably about half of the kids here in grades 7 through 12, so it's certainly a substantial amount of our students, and they're not getting the education that they should be getting. And it comes basically just down to how the schedule is being created.
Any comments?
I'd like to respond to that, Becca. With all due respect, I appreciate everything you do and what the music department does. I know the school counselors work very hard. For a single A school to have a full-time chorus teacher at the high school is really a gift. A lot of schools our size split a person into half-time. When we looked at some of the schedule is driven by the kids and what they sign up for. We have a lot of academic kids that are in band and are in chorus, but a lot of those kids a lot of times also have to take a 4th year Spanish, or they want to take statistics, or they want to take AP Calculus. And we're talking with Mr. Canny. He informed me that 100% of the kids that signed up for band got it, and over 95% of the kids that signed up for chorus got it. This year, we have chorus that goes 5 periods. You have 2 sections where they meet 5 days a week, which we've never had before.
Right.
We can't, when we're building the master schedule, we have to build the master schedule around the core academic classes and the student demand tally. Russ.
Mr. President, and I appreciate, just as an opening statement, you've obviously been very supportive of the arts, as is this board, because I believe the majority of the board members have had students that I've taught in band or in chorus, or most of them both. But I think I'm the only person left in the district that is old enough, so to say, that knows the history of how things used to go. I think this is coming up on my 17th or 18th year here. We had a different team of people that used to build this schedule. I'm not anything against people that are currently building it, because they have lots of other duties. It's really not their primary duty, and may not be their forte. For instance, if you asked me to teach chorus, the chorus would not sound very good. I think if Becca were teaching band, they'd do a lot of singing and not playing much of the instruments. So I think perhaps building the schedule is also the kind of a specialized skill for administrating. Going back 8 years ago, every single student that signed up, well, first off, every single student in 7th and 8th grade had general music and art. Now nobody in 8th grade has general music or art, and if anybody's in band or chorus, they don't get art once they leave 6th grade again, because there's no room in their schedule. And that's purely, well, part of it's staffing, with some of which you addressed tonight, but also some of it is how the schedule's built. I think band and chorus being the only, well, probably one of the only multi-grade level singletons, if it's put on the schedule anywhere other than first, it doesn't have a prayer of succeeding. And I do know that that's how it was built by the previous scheduling team, because, well, that was Fred Usher and Rena Orlowski, because they told me that's how they built it.
But it's scheduled for first this year, both band and chorus. To
No,
my
I mean, it was
understanding,
the first thing put on the schedule before anything else, because it was a multi-grade level singleton. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Judge.
No.
I was.
I thought you thought first period.
But yeah, no, I wasn't clear in the way I stated it. Every student that requested band, they were in there 5 days a week unless they had chorus, in which case we share. And so it's been a dramatic reduction. There should be in the high school, 7 through 12, assuming for 15% attrition, which we never had, we typically had 2%. We should have almost about 180 students in the band. You have in the 7th and 8th grade band going to next year about 50 to 60 students. And you have probably in grades 9 through 12, purely through scheduling issues. For instance, in years past, students are scheduled for, instead of 5 days a week, which I realize we were discussing, they had it one day a week, maybe it's on a Friday, so maybe they were there one day a month. In which case, they just drop. And it's kind of the same thing. So we've seen a dramatic reduction, and this isn't anything that will cost the district anything. But I also, in conversations, they were told point blank, we can't put it in the schedule first because you're not the most important thing. You didn't say that, but other people did. And then we've been told, oh, it's too late. Well, we've gone 7 years where the students have not had a quality music education. And prior to that, some of you may have been here, we had classes of students where we had multiple students who are actually now graduating from college as professional musicians. And now we're in a situation where the students in the high school band are barely able to play because they never are together and aren't receiving instruction. What I would consider in most schools to be 7th grade level music. But when they're coming out of the 6th grade, we're playing, what's the 8th grade level music. But if they get into the junior high, they get it a little bit in junior high, which they get 3 days a week now, whereas it used to be a 5-day-a-week class. Now it's a 3-day-a-week class, unless they're in chorus, in which case it's 2 days a week instead of 5. And I know we have plans to address this going forward next year, which we've been discussing, you and I, since last September. But I think it would be unconscionable for us as music educators, and this doesn't affect me, by the way. As you know, I'm at the elementary, but Todd was planning on coming Thursday, and obviously he can't. He didn't know that the board meeting was changed. And Marlene thought it was Thursday because she was going to come and speak as well. But I think it would be unconscionable on our part not to draw it to the attention and let a whole other school year go by. Where, if we were looking at this from, say, for instance, from a perspective of reverse economics, if you had all the band and chorus students scheduled one period, boom, put them in there, you'd have 50% of your students being served at once, and you'd have your entire staff available to do everything else that might need to be done. You know, so but I think that would also.
But let me say this, and I appreciate you advocating for your subject. I know when I taught, I would often do the same thing. But in the creation of the master's schedule, the art electives are not going to drive the class schedule. They're not. What's going to drive is going to be the student course selection. It's going to be the academic singletons, where we're doing advanced placement courses. It's going to be student choice, where they got to put in from classes, and they have to decide, do I want to take the extra year of foreign language, or do I want to take another year of band or chorus? You know, this year, again, the Federation working with the administration, it's the most collaborative we've been in a long time to get that schedule together. Scott and Stephanie went for specific training at ProSoft, our data company, to be able to do that schedule. We support and have gone for professional development training for the music and art department with the Arts Education Collaborative. We're looking to get into a cycle to order books. Every field trip, concert has been approved. So this administration and faculty support the music and art department.
And I agree with that.
And value it. But you have to understand, with the other concerns, you bring up Fred Usher. Fred Usher was in the day before the Keystone exams, before the increased amount of accountability on the part of the faculty in the school and AYP. It would be unconscionable to dictate the master's schedule on the art electives. Just can't do it in a single A school.
Well,
and we've expanded, Russ. To give a kid a class, an art class, 1 day a week, and they earn 0.2 credits on that. That becomes very problematic trying to get all those kids in, because how much are they really getting instruction? So to be able to expand it to 5 days a week and have more sections that meet that time is a big step.
Well, I appreciate, you know, what you're doing, but, and I do. And I know we're going to be sitting down the week, and I won't be there the 8th, but I'll be there the 9th. I guess my flight gets in at 5 a.m., but I'll be
Right.
there. But 2 strategic plans ago, I was part of that plan. That's where I first met David, because we were on that strategic plan together. And as part of the preamble for our strategic plan for our district at that point, in the preamble was listed how preeminent the arts, both performing and visual, are at that point. In that very short amount of time. And I don't really think, and as you're saying, academic subjects have to drive us. And of course, by definition, music and arts are, by federal and state definition, an academic subject. But we are the multi-grade level singleton, and that's the reason I'm suggesting that it needs to be put on first. And it's not just my suggestion. If I do research in places where it's successful, I see it done that way too. Last week, I guess it was a week ago today, when there was some discussion about an expenditure on some renovation on the track. The comment was made, well, you know, we have to spend that money because it's very disheartening to the students to come out to do track and not have the track be in good shape. And I agree with that. But how disheartening is it for students to year after year put their time into learning how to play an instrument, learn how to sing, learn how to paint, and not actually be able to be part of that program? And I realize here we are, it's the end of the school year, we've already given the students the schedules. But I would love to see if there wouldn't be some way, and maybe I'm sure there's people out there perhaps that are experts at building schedules and do this. It certainly can't be your responsibility, I understand. You know, you did that bit when you were at East Allegheny, I'm sure.
I did.
And I know you did. And I just wonder if it wouldn't be possible to find somebody that has done this. Perhaps the AEC would know people that would do this. Perhaps, you know, I know Quaker Valley years ago, I believe brought in Kent Keenan, who was an administrator out in the eastern part of the state, teaches in Texas now, to look at their specifically arts and music scheduling. And I don't know if that's an option, but we were talking a very large amount when we were discussing the track. I would respectfully ask that perhaps we should figure out a way to, since we still have 2 months or 10 weeks before school starts, and this doesn't have to be given to kids, to see if we can't explore the option of revisiting that schedule and seeing what would happen.
We're not going to revisit the schedule. The schedule that the kids got for 2013, 2014 is the schedule they have.
So
now, if we're looking ahead to next year, you know, we can talk about the process. But they got their schedule.
But this has been 7 years. Every year it's for 7 years. I've come to the administration in September, and we get to the end of the school year, and this is and it's the same thing. We'll look at it next year, and then we looked at it all next year. Marlene sat in meetings the whole school year, and then things were changed without discussion with her in terms of course offerings or. You know.
And again, Russ, you know that the courses are driven by student course selection
well, like 8th grade
and
general
academic
music was
singles.
eliminated. She wasn't informed of that at all.
Well, I think it's also important to mention that with the ensembles in particular, it's not just affecting those students who aren't getting it scheduled. Obviously, those students are being affected by it, but the students that are also in it are affected, because unlike, say, an AP History course where, let's say you have 10 kids in it versus 20 because of a scheduling issue, those 10 kids are going to have the same exact experience. Their grade and their view of AP History isn't going to change based on how many kids are in there. Whereas in a senior high band or a senior high chorus, going from 90-some kids to 40, that drastically changes the ensemble, especially depending on which students are in it, depending on, you know, if there's only 3 boys and then 50 girls. And that drastically changes not only their education in music, but their overall experience and the sound and quality of the ensemble. So it's truly a group effort, a group course, and that's why it's not just a one-person when one person doesn't get scheduled, it does not just affect that one student, it affects every student in the ensemble.
And I think too, when we look at school climate, something I brought to the board's attention a few years ago was the CHAMPS report, which was a longitudinal study done of the education, the data from the Department of Education. That was saying the more you get students involved in activities, school activities in general, but specifically the performing arts, the more likely they are to have good test scores, the more likely they are to have good attendance, the less likely they are to become a discipline issue. And there was, at one point, there was a philosophy that we had, which was to try to get every student involved in either music or a sport as a way to have them being mentored the whole way through to keep them keep them on the straight and narrow. So it's not only just us, but I also think it helps the district, obviously, trying to meet AYP. Since Carly emailed out the PSSA scores today, I went through, or last week, but I went through them today, and I didn't have I had one student out of 100 that I looked at that wasn't either proficient or advanced. You know, so we have this opportunity, I think, too. We get these kids kind of jazzed about coming to school. I mean, there are some kids who love to come into their algebra class, and I was one of them. But a lot of the kids, you know, they don't want to get up in the morning, and they think, well, I'll go to school because I want to get to my band rehearsal and my music rehearsal. You know, maybe for some kids it's getting to football practice, but you know, every kid, you're going to reach them with something different. And I really, since we have, you know, or perhaps we do have the possibility with computers to try to virtualize something else to see if something would work, you know. And some of the discussions I had was people that they were just trying to tweak an already broken template. You know, and the template didn't work to begin with. So I mean, you know, they tweaked it, you know, and I think with the best of intentions. So I'm not, you know, it's certainly, you know, Scott was particularly was a music major before he had some physical issues that he couldn't continue. His parents didn't write music. Certainly, you know, everybody I think is very supportive of the arts, but I don't think that changes the fact that this is not the best that I think we can do.
Do we have, you want to stand and state your name and where you're from?
Hi, I'm Gina Popichak. I'm Regina Popichak. I'm from Carnegie. The passion I get here. But I have a student who is in AP classes. He's going to be a junior this year. That student who has been, you know, active in the music department is not able to be in ensemble or chorus as junior year. Now, if it's driven by the students and the AP classes, for him to be able to participate, he would not be able to take his AP classes. Now, I know as a fact, a lot of the other students in those AP classes also must participate. So I'm a little confused why when you only have like one AP English class in your junior, you stick it in a schedule, that takes that group, like Mr. Jeanette said, takes that group completely out of the mix. Then why was that named an AP class in that schedule? I'm kind of confused why if it's student-driven and the AP classes are student-driven, why those students aren't getting choices this year. There was not a choice, it's not an option. You don't even, you have 30 kids in a class to start with, which is something I've always been fighting for almost 5 years, telling me that as the kids progress through the AP courses, they'll get lower and lower and lower in the amount of students because we didn't need to add an extra teacher to that. Well, now we never got into 2 teachers for the AP classes, so the kids are all dealing 30, 32 in a classroom, a lab last year trying to pull in chairs and stuff. You know, now he's going into his junior year in the same situation. You have 30-some kids in classrooms. He's not able to do the one thing he truly enjoys. He has no choice. If it's student-driven, I'm a little curious why nobody asked the students.
The students sign up for course select sheets.
Yeah.
Right.
Not only that, you're telling me you're not changing the schedule, and he has to have 6 credits. It's required to have 6 credits. He only had 5 1/4. That doesn't even work. So his schedule's going to have to be changed somehow because he has to have the 6 credits.
Well, have you contacted his counselor individually?
Of course, no one has responded to me. I have to say, although she's not here, this has been very difficult to contact people what's going on. I have issues with, you know, trying to get, she's been a good counselor, so I've talked to her a couple times, Mrs. Barnes, but, you know, they're busy. They got a lot of students. I'm sure they're very upset with their schedules. And in mine, this particular case, it has to be changed. There's no choice. He has to have 6 credits. So that needs to be fixed. I haven't heard back from anybody. I sent a note to the assistant principal, find out she's not here for the next 2 weeks about another issue I'm still dealing with. It's hard to contact our people up here. You know, and I want to be student driven too. Like I said, I have kids that are doing well in this school district. I have no desire to leave the school district, but it never seems to be any cooperation between what the kids want to do and what everybody decides. They just decide for them. So I think something needs to give here. We need to be listening to the kids a little bit more.
Could I interject a question?
Certainly.
There was what I thought might be a conflict in information. Somebody mentioned that in one of the classes there was 90 kids that signed up and 40-some.
Based off of, and as far as I know, there might be a slight difference in number based on how the kids rank their choices, because I believe that when they're choosing their electives, they have to say, I want this one, and if I can't get it, I'll take this, and if I can't get it, I'll take this. So they might not have all ranked it as number 1, but based on the number I had in senior high chorus this year, I took away the seniors that I had leaving, but then I added in the upcoming 8th graders who had been in my 8th grade chorus, and that was over 90 students, and that's without, there was at least 10 students between grades 9 through 11 this year that couldn't get it in their schedule last year, but that were intending to get it in again. So again, I should have at least 90 students who I know of signing up for chorus. Again, that might not have been their first choice, but it was certainly on there. And my roster, as per June 13th, has 48 students. And then that doesn't even count I have 2 honors ensembles that are audition only, my female ensemble, my male ensemble. And because of scheduling issues this past year, auditions had previously been held in late spring, and I was told, oh, that makes it really difficult to schedule, please hold them earlier. I had them in February of this year for the upcoming year. 29 girls should be in my female ensemble, 18 boys should be in my male ensemble. 18 girls are currently scheduled in that female ensemble, 13 boys out of 18, and out of those, they're not even scheduled together. It's like Monday, Wednesday is 5 of them, Tuesday, Thursday is like another 5, Monday, Friday is like 8 of them. So what that basically means, like for example, for my girls, it makes it impossible to plan. Not only are they not singing together, which is the entire point of an ensemble, they work with each other as they sing and make music. But that means, so if I'm teaching a new lesson, I have 5 girls on Monday who are getting it for the first time. On Tuesday, I have those same 5 girls, but now I have 5 brand new girls who haven't seen me that week. So I have to reteach that same lesson. Then let's say Wednesday, it's 5 girls who have now had me 3 times, and now 10 girls who haven't seen me at all yet. And that's how both my male ensemble is scheduled as well. I mean, it makes it absolutely impossible to follow any kind of structure.
So, Mr. Pfeiffer, I know the numbers may be different because of the way they're ranked, like 1, 2, or 3, or whatever, but it's your understanding that a much higher percentage...
From talking with Mr. King, now, you know, not seeing individual students' course select sheets, it's the course select sheets that the counselors use to put the kids in the classes where the classes are available. So sometimes there's going to be conflicts, and then sometimes the kids have to decide, do I want to take this elective or this elective? And sometimes that's tough. You know, our teachers by contract only teach 5 periods a day out of an 8-period day.
Right.
They have a duty, they have a prep, and they have a lunch.
Yeah.
So again, that's part of the day starts at 7:30 and ends at 2:07. That's another concern.
I would say in a vacuum, if everything else fleshes out in some kind of reason, which I don't even know how to define that right now, but if we have a 50% hit rate for requests versus classes being fulfilled, there's a gap here that we could, in theory, close, and that maybe we can't. But personally, it feels like there's a gap there, and I've never scheduled, and I can't imagine the complexity involved, so I'll throw that out. But I'll quietly recognize as an individual that I do see a value in performing as a group if we can make that work. So I don't know what anybody else thinks or doesn't think, or what what reasons are for that gap in perception, but that seems like a high number if only half the kids got the class, so.
Right.
I'm sorry. My name is Mary Kay Smith. I've had 5 children. My youngest is now going to be a senior next year. And she could not get chorus or girls ensemble, even though she made it. She auditioned and made it for girls ensemble. I think she has it 1 day a week. I suggested that she just drop physics and redo her entire schedule so that she can have the thing she loves the most about Carlynton, and it has been all along the music program, the band and the chorus program. Luckily, some of them do float and are able to get them into their schedule, but I'm suggesting, and I'm not saying that this comes before academics by any means, but if you schedule this first, because it goes from 7th through 12th grade, because they have to work together, if you can schedule this first, by all means, you should do that, and then put everything in. And if something happens that, I'm sorry, this is the only time we can have this AP history class, and you are going to have to take, something out, then so be it. But they've never even tried it that way. They've always said, no courses less, that's fluff. I've actually heard the school board refer to the arts as fluff. When my oldest daughter, Becca Jeanette, was in chorus, and I was fighting for it then. Fluff is what the school board called it. And I don't think it's fluff. My daughter's making a career out of it. One of my children, my other child was in the band this year, as you might know. He was a senior. He was the drum major for the band, and also lead in the musical. So I have a lot, and I see what comes from this. My daughter is now ranked 2nd in her senior class, in the class coming up. And part of that, I think, is because of how our school has the arts, and how she loves coming here because of that, and she works hard with everything. But I'm suggesting, I'm telling her, I'm demanding that she drops physics this year. And that's ridiculous as a parent to say, drop something academic. But I know what the band and the chorus mean to her. So that's what we're doing.
And there are some people, Irina Orlovsky, again, I think she has all of her old master schedules from when she used to build it and when this wasn't an issue. And she's now your elementary phys ed teacher. And she left the high school guidance counselor position because the person who built the schedule didn't consult with her and then blamed her for the mistakes. And then she left the position, but they're still using, I believe we're still using that template that she left over.
They're using an all-new scheduler from ProSoft.
Okay.
And receive training in that.
Right, okay. Well, of course, you would know more about that than I.
And again, it's your fellow Federation members that are putting the schedule together.
Yeah, we have one more comment, and then I'm going to say we're going to have to, 2 more comments, okay. Young lady in the back, your name, please?
My name is Christy Crawshaw, student here, 9th grade, going to 10th. The arts classes do mean a lot to people. To the students, some of the best students you have in your school district have art. I'm upset because I won't ever be able to have a visual art or a different kind of art because I'm in girls ensemble and I'm in high school chorus, and I wanted to take percussion ensemble this year, but can't fit it in. But I'll never have a band, and I'll never have another arts class, and I haven't had one since 6th grade, which is quite a long time. Also, it's just music is people's lives. It does make people, and it is their lives. It's their careers, obviously. And it's just some careers start in high school and stuff like that. They start in elementary school in little chorus. When you're in 4th grade. Then you keep going up and keep following it all the way to the top until you're a senior. Then you go to college if you really like it. Then you keep going. So you come like that. And then and then they change our lives. And then so I could have a career in music or art, which I would like to look into. So it does make a big difference in students' lives. So just putting that out there.
Thank you.
Just to schedule it and to make a difference and at least try to, it would mean a lot though.
Thank you. You would like to comment?
Yeah.
Your name, please?
My name is Peg Croshaw. I'm her mother. And I just want to reiterate what she said, that it really is important to them. And Chrissy gets up every morning and she can't wait to be in Miss Jeanette's class in girls' ensemble and chorus. And it does. I know, the superintendent's probably thinking, oh, of course, we're going to have a baby. Who knows? But you know what? It really means a lot to some of these kids. Some of them look forward. That's the high part of their day, some of these kids. These are good kids, and to take something like that,
Well, there's no question, and nobody's taking anything away. Again, my comment is, it can't drive the schedule. It can't drive the schedule.
It's sad that the scheduling isn't working for a teacher that has to split all these girls up. They're phenomenal.
Well, and there's other electives and things that also have to split kids up, and there's also kids that have to choose, and maybe they're not able to take 2 foreign languages in the same year, or maybe they're not able to take an additional science class. It is difficult sometimes.
Because there are also state requirements for other academic classes that have to be fulfilled in order for a child to graduate from high school. So, and that is dictated by the Department of Education that the board has to follow as well.
The one thing that lots of school districts do is instead of going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as you know, most school districts have day 1, day 2, day 3, and they do a 6 or 7 day rotation. So they never miss the Mondays, they never have the Friday off, and it's always this is day 1, this is day 2. If day 3 is a snow day, when you make up that snow day, it's day 3 and you go with that schedule. And I know it's not in the contract now, but I really suggest, I know it's
No, it's not a contract.
Oh, it's not? Oh. Well, I really suggest that you might look into a 6-day rotation so that on day 6, we have all of the chorus kids in one class. Or the kid that loves art, that never got to have art in his schedule because the academics came first. On day 6, he has art, finally. So it's a very simple procedure. I have talked to a lot of people at Charters Valley. That's how they work. You never miss days of school. Look and research that day 1, day 2. I believe that South Fayette is also on a 6-day rotation instead of 5 days.
Okay, with
Adds an extra day of life.
Thank you. One more comment, and
Can I
then...
just ask one question? And I agree with everything that you guys are saying, and I don't mean to rough you off. But when you were doing the personnel items, there wasn't a Title I math at Carnegie Elementary, and the Title I math teacher retired. So I was just curious as to what was going on.
We had our title funds slashed by half. Last year, the Title I program was over $600-some thousand. It was slashed over $300-some thousand. So through attrition, we're not replacing the Title I teacher there.
So there's no Title I math at all?
I didn't say that. So we're not replacing the position. We're leaving it up to the building principals in elementary. If you're reading specialist in K through 6, you've got the ability to teach some math, and then you can also do reading at that same time, so that the kids would be able to have, through their Title I teacher and the use of the RTI program, they can get some of those needs met, and then we're looking through some additional Title I monies to add on some after-school tutoring there.
So Title I teachers that are RTI and reading would be able to take those children and do reading and math?
Right, we had to reduce the title, we had to cut back the title teacher. So the building principals are going to utilize title, if it's a reading specialist and somebody who's certified K through 6 elementary, that they could also do reading and math, and then use the RTI.
Would there be enough time for those teachers to do both reading and...
Well, not in the same lab, you'd have to divide up the lab time. So period 2 might be your Title I reading lab, period 3 might be your Title I math.
I'm just thinking that the Title I teachers, anytime I saw them, they were always busy teaching their class. Now this is going to be something that's going to be added on.
No, it's not added on. It's like having a dual certification. They're going to be able to do both.
If those teachers are always teaching, they're always either doing Title I reading or RTI, and then at the same time they were doing math, there were kids that were across the hall doing math. And they're going to have to split their time amongst all these kids. I don't think the kids are going to get as much time then as they did in the past.
Well, like I said, we're suffering the budget cuts from the federal government. So the building principals are going to be able to utilize that teacher to best meet the individual needs of the kids. And remember, Title, the way we run it as a pull-out program, is a short-term program. So if a child can be in there for 2 weeks and meet up the deficiency or the need that they have, then they're supposed to rotate out and somebody else is supposed to rotate in. So it's not like a special needs placement where the child's identified and then they're there for the rest of their career.
Oh, I understand that. But I just didn't know if the district would ever absorb that, the amount of money that was paid to that teacher, if the district would take that on and absorb that as just adding.
Not for this upcoming budget.
I mean, I hate to ask it after everything that was said tonight, but I was just curious because I did not see it on the personnel.
Because it's going on 11 o'clock, and we appreciate your comments. We're not going to come to any decision regarding that. I think the superintendent can further research what you're presenting as far as your facts, and he can talk to the guidance counselors and make sure that what he understands is factual as well. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
All those in favor?
Oh, second.
Second, I'm sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.